This stunning beauty is the ultimate master of the bedroom arts in all of Joseon. Tonight, her mission is simple: seduce the king. Before the encounter, the palace staff secretly spiked the king's tea with a powerful aphrodisiac. This stuff is so potent that even an old man on the verge of logging out of life would be instantly revitalized after just one sip. The staff did this for one reason. They are desperate for the king to finally show some favor to the ladies in waiting. The king drinks the tea and immediately feels a scorching heat surging through his body. Sensing the moment has arrived, the maid boldly steps forward. She helps the king undress and begins to strip off her own clothes. In his drug-induced haze, the king sees a blurry vision of his late beloved princess. He mumbles her name, Jaeyeon. Seizing the opportunity, the maid whispers softly that she can be Jaeyeon's replacement. But the second those words leave her lips, the king snaps back to reality. He instantly draws his sword and screams at the maid for daring to utter that sacred name. In a fit of cold rage, he slashes the hair ribbon right off her head. Outside, the staff hears the king's roar and sees the terrified maid bolt out of the room. They rush inside to beg for mercy. Facing the king's wrath, they plead with him that for the future of Joseon, he must marry and produce an heir soon. Just as the king is about to deal with the meddling staff, he is stopped by Shinwon, the king's best friend and a high-ranking investigator. Thanks to Shinwon's intervention, the staff barely escaped with their lives. You see, Shinwon and the king are close, but they have a grim job. They are responsible for hunting down anyone who gets married in secret. For years, the citizens have been suffering, cursing the king as a madman and even a tyrant. During their meeting today, Shinwon is brutally honest, telling the king that the nasty rumors circulating might actually be true. He reminds the king that he understands the original intent behind the marriage ban. As it turns out, during the grand selection process for a new queen, a national ban is enforced. Every eligible woman in the country is forbidden from marrying until the king picks a new bride. But it's been 7 long years, and every selection has failed, meaning the ban has never been lifted. Shinwon warns him that while he understands the king's pain, the king needs to have some sympathy for the people who have been suffering for nearly a decade. Despite the lecture, the king still hopes Shinwon will stay on his side. But where there is a strict law, there is a business opportunity. A clever woman named So-rong sees this gap in the market. Along with her partner, she plans to rent a shop to open a specialized tea house that offers fortune-telling for men and women, basically an illegal matchmaking spot. After scouting around, So-rong finds the perfect location and signs the deal on the spot. She names her shop The Palace. The realtor warns her that if a couple falls in love and marries secretly, they will be arrested. But So-rong isn't scared. She's determined to make a killing in the marriage business. Meanwhile, back at the court, the officials are piling on the pressure. They argue that the marriage ban has caused the birth rate to plummet. With no babies being born, the very future of the nation is at stake. They beg the king to lead by example and finally select a new queen. The public's opinion of the king is hitting rock bottom. People are calling him a crazy tyrant, a man addict, or even claiming he's impotent, which is why he refuses to marry. Exhausted by the constant bickering of the officials, the king finally snaps. He declares right then and there that the ban will not be extended and he will choose a new queen this year. Lately, creepy legends have been haunting the palace. Rumor has it that the vengeful ghost of the late Jaeyeon, who died under tragic circumstances, is haunting her old palace. They say her spirit is blocking the romantic fates of everyone in Joseon, preventing any marriages from happening. Some even claim the king saw her ghost and completely lost his mind. To shut down the rumors and face his own inner demons, the king decides to visit Jaeyeon's old quarters. On the way, he stops by a familiar pond and bridge, drifting into a deep memory. Back when Jaeyeon was alive and had just become the crown princess, the king had specially renovated this area for their dates. No one would ever guess that the violent tyrant of today was once a cute, clingy young man who begged Jaeyeon to call him by his intimate name, Hyun. But back then, Jaeyeon was a woman strictly bound by royal etiquette. Every move she made was carefully guarded, never daring to cross the line of propriety. The king, however, never gave up on trying to make her happy. He would offer her sweet wine, hoping that their future together would be just as sweet and joyful. Jaeyeon knew deep down just how much the king loved her. She was completely devoted to him, but she never wanted to become his weakness or a target for his enemies. With a calm, steady voice, she once warned him, "Even if the day comes when I am forced to leave you, please do not worry. You must take care of yourself." Hearing this, the king tried to make her promise to stay healthy. He reached out his hand for a pinky swear, a sacred vow. Jaeyeon hesitated for a moment, then gently took his hand and kissed it. But she never actually completed the pinky swear. Not long after that, the tragedy struck. Jaeyeon was found dead in her bedchambers, having taken her own life. According to palace protocol, if a king views the body of someone who committed suicide, it brings a terrible omen. But the king didn't give a damn about bad luck. He collapsed, cradling Jaeyeon's lifeless body and sobbing uncontrollably. He was convinced that she didn't die by choice, that someone had forced her into it. Fast forward to the present. The king returns to Jaeyeon's old room. As he stands there, the trauma hits him, and he begins to hallucinate. He sees the horrifying image of her hanging from the ceiling, and her body covered in blood. Moments later, the king passes out. When he wakes up, he is hysterical, wandering around and crying out for Jaeyeon, but she's nowhere to be found. Shinwon hears the commotion and rushes in. Seeing the king broken and weeping on the floor, his heart sinks. He reminds the king of his promise. If you vowed to pick a new queen this year, you have to let go of the past and forget Jaeyeon. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, So-rong's new tea house is finally opening its doors. A business like this needs staff, and a girl named Hae Young shows up for the interview. While checking her luggage, So-rong finds a collection of romance novels Hae Young's been reading, titles like The Scholar from the Stars, The Heirs of the Great Arab Nation, and Harem of the Sun, clear parodies of famous K-dramas. Seeing that she's a girl of culture, So-rong hires her on the spot. With the perfect team assembled, the shop officially opens, and it's an instant hit. Women from all over the city swarm the place. The news quickly reaches Shinwon. Apparently, women are gathering at this one spot every night and staying until dawn. When the king overhears Shinwon discussing this with a colleague, he decides to go undercover. He wants to hear firsthand what the common people actually think of him. They head outside the palace and track down the shop named The Palace. Peeking through the doors and eavesdropping, they overhear So-rong absolutely roasting the marriage ban. She even boldly speculates that the reason the king has banned marriage for 7 years is probably because he's impotent and can't have children. Hearing this, the king can't help but let out a dry, sarcastic laugh. Fed up with her busyness, he leads his men to storm the place and arrest her. Panic ensues. So-rang tries to make a break for it, and in the chaos, she accidentally trips and falls right into Shinwon's arms. Shinwon looks at her face and feels a strange sense of familiarity, like they've met before. But before he can ask, she's off and running again. Unfortunately for her, with both the king and Shinwon on her tail, she doesn't get far. They catch her and throw her straight into a jail cell. But even behind bars, So-rang doesn't lose her cool. She uses her legendary silver tongue to defend herself, insisting she's not some low-level scammer. She claims she is a relationship counselor, someone who helps men and women who love each other connect their fates. She argues passionately, if holding on to love is a crime, then everyone in Joseon is a criminal. Her words are so deep and moving that Shinwon is almost convinced. Right then, the king returns to the palace, and Shinwon rushes to meet him. Just as they come together, they hear a strange voice coming from the jail. It's So-rong. She started putting on a wild performance, pretending to be a shaman possessed by spirits, desperately trying to trick her way out of prison. Using the tiny scraps of information she's managed to overhear, So-rong makes a bold prediction. The marriage ban will finally end this year. But she adds a terrifying catch. They must first appease the vengeful spirit of the late Jaehyun, or a massive catastrophe will strike the nation. The king is stunned. This hits him right where it hurts because he did plan on lifting the ban this year. He starts to wonder if So-rong might actually be the real deal, possessed by divine spirits. What So-rong didn't expect was that her matchmaker act would catch the king's personal attention. She's quickly hauled into the palace for a high-stakes interrogation. Now dressed in a new outfit, So-rong steps into the king's presence looking incredibly nervous. To her surprise, the first thing the king asks is, "Am I currently haunted by a demon?" So-rong, a master of reading people, immediately notices the king's dull eyes and the deep dark circles under them, clear signs of a man who has been hollowed out by emotional trauma. Thinking fast, she starts listing classic symptoms of heartbreak, loss of appetite, stomach pains, and chronic fatigue. The king is instantly sold. He is convinced that So-rong possesses a powerful spiritual aura. Then comes the impossible request. The king demands she summon the soul of Jaehyun. So-rong internally panics, but as the king grows increasingly impatient and dangerously angry, she has no choice. She dives into a frantic ritual to call forth the spirit. While performing these flashy, over-the-top movements, her mind is racing, trying to figure out how to survive this performance. Suddenly, she goes into possession mode. Mimicking Jaehyun's voice, So-rong begs the king for forgiveness. She claims she's been lingering around him all this time, trapped in a world of suffering. She tells him that seeing him so gaunt and consumed by grief was more than her spirit could bear. Faced with what he believes is his long-lost love, the king breaks down into a puddle of tears. He refuses to let go, sobbing and begging her over and over again not to leave him. Once she feels she's achieved her goal, So-rong quickly snaps back to her normal self. The king, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of joy and sorrow, orders everyone to leave. But despite her heart-pounding performance, So-rong isn't given her freedom. She's sent straight back to her jail cell. Back behind bars, she is absolutely fuming. Right then, she overhears a guard call out the name Shinwon, and she's caught off guard. As it turns out, years ago, Shinwon's parents had sent a marriage proposal to her family, but the two of them had never actually met. She realizes she can't count on him for help. After the chaos subsides, the king is left feeling restless. It's not that he doesn't want to hold the grand selection and end the marriage ban, but he's terrified of creating a new victim while the real killer is still out there. You see, for the past 6 years, every time they tried to choose a new queen, a woman's body was found hanging in the concubine's palace. The public curses the king as a madman, but the truth is far more sinister. The marriage ban is actually a plot by a traitorous general, the very man who helped the king take the throne. Jaehyun's death was tied to this general, and now he's become completely unstoppable. After much thought, the king agrees to a new plan. So-rong will be disguised as a palace maid to stay by his side and comfort the restless ghosts in the palace. That night, Shinwon releases her from jail, gets her changed, and escorts her into the palace grounds. While crossing a magnificent, flower-lined bridge, the king catches a glimpse of So-rong's side profile. In his dazed state, he thinks he sees Jaehyun. He screams her name, lunges forward, and pulls So-rong into a desperate, crushing hug. Shinwon stands nearby, completely horrified by the king's actions. A moment later, the king snaps back to his senses and awkwardly lets her go. That sudden, unexpected embrace leaves both of them tossing and turning, unable to sleep a wink all night. Before officially starting her life as a ghost-comforting maid, So-rong is allowed one last visit home. She immediately tells Hae-young and her business partner all about her wild adventures inside the palace. However, there's one major problem. So-rong doesn't actually know anything about the real Jaehyun. She realizes that if she has to survive by faking this identity every day, it's going to be like living in a cage with a hungry tiger. At this point, So-rong's business partner gives her a pro tip. A truly great scammer shouldn't make the king remember his grief even more. Instead, she needs to make him forget his longing entirely. The next day, it's time for Shin-won to officially escort So-rong into the palace. As they hit the main street, they witness a heartbreaking scene. A husband and wife are being forcibly torn apart by soldiers. Seeing this, So-rong's expression darkens. She knows that the marital happiness of every single person in Joseon now rests on her successfully infiltrating the palace. As Shin-won and So-rong continue walking through the busy streets, a luxurious sedan chair passes by. Through the thin, fluttering veil of the carriage, So-rong catches a glimpse of a noblewoman sitting inside. Suddenly, she's hit with a wave of pure terror. She instinctively dives behind Shin-won's back to hide. But it's too late. The noblewoman definitely saw her. She immediately orders her guards to stop the carriage and starts searching the streets for So-rong. Thinking fast, So-rong and Shin-won bolt down a narrow alleyway to make their escape. Shin-won is incredibly suspicious, wondering why So-rong is acting like a hunted mouse, but she refuses to give him a straight answer. Once they finally reach safety, she lets out a long sigh and mutters to herself that hiding in the palace might actually be her safest bet. It's implied that this mysterious noblewoman is the same person who once sent people to try and take So-rong's life. As soon as she enters the palace, So-rong's first nightmare begins: etiquette training. Looking at the massive stacks of protocol books and listening to the head court lady's never-ending lectures, So-rong's head starts spinning. She feels so overwhelmed that she jokingly feels like her ears are about to bleed in protest. But the court lady doesn't care about So-rong's reaction for a second. The moment the crash course is over, she rushes So-rong off to serve the king. It happens to be dinner time. So-rong and a group of maids, along with the head court lady, stand at attention by the king's dining table. Seeing the table overflowing with gourmet dishes, So-rong's stomach betrays her and lets out a massive, uncontrollable growl. The king, who already has zero appetite and feels depressed, finds the noise incredibly annoying. He orders everyone to get out, keeping only So-rong behind to scold her for her disrespectful stomach growling in his presence. Sensing she's in hot water, So-rong pulls out her secret weapon. She pretends to communicate with the spirit of Jaehyun. She starts talking to the empty air, claiming that the ghost wants So-rong to eat well so she can be a better vessel. This trick works every single time. Whenever it involves Jaehyun, the king loses all logic and principles. To please the spirit of his late love, the king actually allows So-rong to sit down right next to him and join him for the meal. So-rong doesn't hold back. She eats like a wild animal, basically a one-woman storm sweeping through the plates. Caught up in her energy, the king starts eating just as fast, and the two of them end up playfully fighting over the food. Once every single plate is licked clean, So-rong respectfully thanks the empty air and sends Jaehyun's spirit away. Seeing this, the king actually follows suit, waving goodbye to the air as if Jaehyun were really standing there. When it's time to clear the table, the head court lady is overjoyed to see the empty plates. Since Jaehyun passed away, the king hasn't had a full meal once. So-rong is secretly thrilled she's won today's battle. She figures if she can eventually fix the king's eating and sleeping habits, everyone will believe she really cured his demonic possession. After dinner is over, Shin-won arrives to escort So-rong back to her quarters. Looking at Shin-won's back, it suddenly hits So-rong that her entire life now is built on a lie. If she's ever caught, she's headed straight for the executioner. She realizes she needs an ally for protection, and Shin-won is her best bet. On the spot, she pulls out a bottle of wine and drags a very confused Shin-won to a small pavilion to share a drink together. At first, Shin-won has zero interest in drinking because he's still on the clock, but So-rong plays her trump card, telling him that protecting her is the single most important mission the king personally assigned to him. Shin-won has no choice but to give in. Using her legendary social skills and knowledge of the commoners' lively drinking culture, So-rong manages to turn Shin-won into her new best friend after just 2 shots. They even agree to drop the formal language and speak comfortably. Then, Shin-won drops a bombshell question. He asks So-rong about her life before the marriage ban and if she's ever had any dating experience. This question catches her so off guard that she literally spits out a mouthful of wine. Thinking fast, So-rong starts spinning a web of lies. She claims she's always been an orphan who never knew her true identity and spent her days begging for scraps on the streets before the palace opened its doors. It's a tragic sob story designed to make Shin-won stop digging. It works. Shin-won feels for her and immediately drops the subject. Now it's So-rong's turn. She asks him the same thing, and Shin-won reveals that he was actually on the verge of getting married once to the eldest daughter of a high-ranking official. Hearing this, So-rong's face completely changes. Why? Because she is the official's eldest daughter. Flashback to years ago. Shin-won's family had arranged a marriage with So-rong. Curious about what his future wife was like, Shin-won went undercover as a delivery boy bringing wedding gifts to her house. First, he spotted the second daughter, the child of the official's new wife, but she was so arrogant and nasty that Shin-won immediately thought, nope, not her. He kept looking and found himself near So-rong's room. Even though he could only see half of her face through the window, he was instantly captivated. At the same time, So-rong, excited about her upcoming wedding, was daydreaming out loud about her groom, hoping he'd be handsome. She thought she was talking to herself, but Shin-won was standing right outside the window, whispering back responses to everything she said. In a magical night filled with falling flower petals, the two of them shared a romantic, secret moment and made a silent vow to spend their lives together. But the wedding day turned into a total disaster. When Xinwan lifted the veil, he realized the bride was the mean younger sister he had seen the night before, not the girl he loved. He stopped the ceremony right then and there, demanding to know where his real bride was. Just as things reached a breaking point, royal soldiers stormed in to announce the king's new marriage ban. The wedding was cancelled instantly. As it turns out, the noblewoman So-Rong saw earlier the evil stepmother knew the ban was coming. She tried to force So-Rong out and swap her with the younger sister so her own daughter wouldn't be stuck single for years. Since that day, Xinwan has been desperately searching for the eldest daughter he fell for. In his heart, she is his only true bride. He only became a palace investigator so he could use the resources to find her. Listening to his story, So-Rong's heart is a mess of emotions. She knows she can't reveal her true identity now, so all she can do is comfort him and tell him it's time to move on and forget about that girl. The next morning, a trusted minister brings a massive update to the king. A witness has appeared at a tavern in Donghua Inn, claiming to be the one who harmed Jaeyan. Based on witness descriptions, the minister has already drawn a sketch of the suspect and is launching a manhunt. The king is obsessed. He will stop at nothing to find proof that Jaeyan was murdered and drag the mastermind out into the light. As night falls, the king wakes up from yet another nightmare. It's getting hard to keep track of how many times this has happened now. His ladies-in-waiting are completely exhausted, staring at him in despair, wondering how on earth they're going to get him back to sleep this time. Now it's So-Rong's turn to step into the king's bedchamber. Instead of the usual routine, she boldly suggests that the king head outside for a walk. Her logic? If he wants to sleep like a baby, he needs to get moving. Physical exhaustion is the best cure for insomnia. And of course, she uses this chance to double down on her image as a spirit master who knows exactly what his body needs. When they reach a small bridge, So-Rang starts some tactical brainwashing. She tells him that the reason he hears those creepy, unexplainable sounds at night is simply that his physical constitution is too weak. The second the king hears the words weak constitution, his pride hits the roof. To prove her wrong, he summons Xinwan for an immediate sparring session. He commands Xinwan not to hold back and to give it everything he's got. However, even though Xinwan only uses about 30% of his strength, the king still loses the match. Thoroughly embarrassed, the king quickly makes an excuse to retreat to the palace. But still wanting to look like a cool hero in front of So-Rong, he can't help but flex his muscles to show off. So-Rong, seeing right through him, literally bursts out laughing. Despite the hectic night, the king still can't fall asleep. Having heard that So-Rong has traveled through all 8 provinces of Joseon, he demands she tell him some interesting folktales. So-Rong starts narrating all the most famous stories of the land, but she's clever. She sprinkles in some extra seasoning about the marriage ban, subtly suggesting that the king should lift it as soon as possible. Surprisingly, the king finally falls into a deep, refreshing sleep. So-Rong, on the other hand, is a total wreck. After pulling an all-nighter, her face is pale and ghostly, and she rushes to get permission to go back and catch up on sleep. But as she's stumbling out of the room, she catches the eye of a high-ranking military officer because she's walking like a zombie monster. This officer is highly suspicious of any new face around the king, and he immediately grills the head court lady for answers. Once the officer leaves, the court lady wastes no time telling Xinwan to escort So-Rong back to her quarters. Because the sleep companion mission went so well, So-Rong is called back to the king's side the very next night. But the moment she enters, she finds the king in a blind rage. The floor is covered in scrolls, angry letters from the public criticizing him, many of them mocking him by saying he's incapable of having children. Whenever he feels attacked like this, he misses Jaeyan even more. Under the king's intense pressure, So-Rong has no choice but to fake another possession. However, she knows this ghost act can't last forever, so she comes up with a new plan. Using Jaeyan's voice, she tells the king that she wants him to let her go and return to being the benevolent king he once was. She whispers that if he truly misses her, he should look at the girl in this palace, referring to herself, as her shadow. After saying this, So-Rong bows her head, pretending Jaeyan's spirit has departed. Coming back to her normal self, she tenderly wipes away the king's tears and tucks him in. As she gently holds his hand, she wonders if her decision to become Jaeyan's shadow was the right move, but the king seems to have finally accepted it. Later, So-Rong asks for a 2-day leave to go home, and the king doesn't object. He immediately orders Xinwan to escort her the whole way. When they arrive, Xinwan politely helps So-Rong down from her horse and calls her my lady, Tutu. For a split second, So-Rong is shaken. It's like she's been transported back to the days when she was still the eldest daughter of a noble family. That night, So-Rong couldn't stop tossing and turning. She wonders if Xinwan has actually recognized her, or why else would he treat her with such incredible gentleness? But the past is a double-edged sword. It brings back the sweet memories of her first love, but it also carries the paralyzing fear of being hunted by her stepmother. In the middle of the night, So-Rong wakes up screaming from a nightmare. She can't escape the horrific image of her mother being murdered and the chilling, dark gaze of her stepmother. She has to constantly brainwash herself, repeating the lie that the eldest daughter of that noble family died a long time ago. Now, she is just So-Rong, a low-class commoner trying to survive. To clear her head, So-Rong steps outside for some fresh air, only to find a surprise waiting for her. Xinwan never left. He's been standing guard outside her house all night. In that moment, a butterfly happens to land on So-Rong's head. As Xinwan reaches out to shoo it away, the butterfly flutters off, and his hand gently grazes her forehead. The accidental touch leaves So-Rong looking incredibly cute in her utter confusion. Feeling a wave of bashfulness, she quickly scrambles to her feet and rushes back into her room, her heart racing. Meanwhile, back to the mystery. 10 days ago, a man appeared in the city claiming to be the one who harmed Jaeyeon. The king had sent his most trusted minister to investigate, but by the time they arrived, the man had already been silenced, murdered to keep him quiet. The king can only sigh in frustration, having been one step too late. The minister suggests a change in strategy. Instead of always chasing the prey, they should lure the enemy out. He proposes a royal hunt. On one hand, it would show the public that the king is physically fit and strong, crushing the rumors of his ill health. On the other, it might force the mastermind to make a move. The king hasn't held a hunt in years for a very personal reason. Once, he proudly showed a deer he had hunted to Jaeyeon, but she actually fainted at the sight of it. When she woke up, she gave the king a long lecture on compassion, telling him he shouldn't treat killing as something to celebrate. Even though he hates the idea of hunting now, he agrees to do it just to drag Jaeyeon's killers out of the shadows. To prepare, the king picks up a bow and arrow for the first time in years, but let's just say he's a bit rusty. Every single arrow he fires misses the target completely. Just as the king is starting to feel discouraged, a court official comes sprinting toward him, clutching a wild pheasant. He claims the king hit it perfectly. Everyone around starts cheering wildly. Even if the truth is a bit staged, it definitely gives the king's ego the boost he needed. In another part of the city, a woman is wailing in the streets. Her daughter has been snatched away by a flower thief, a kidnapper. The bystanders are furious, blaming the whole tragedy on the king's blind obsession with the marriage ban. To the common people, this ban is a disaster, but for the evil stepmother, it's a golden business opportunity. She has founded the Women's Aspiration Society, a high-end training center for noble families. She claims that if they send their daughters to her, she'll train them to have a shot at becoming the next queen. After a flashy sales pitch, the noble mothers are hooked, immediately dropping huge sums of money to sign up their daughters. Later that day, the stepmother is proudly leaving after closing another deal when a mysterious woman calls out to her. The stepmother tries to hide her face, nervously insisting she isn't some runaway Kisang, courtesan. But that slip of the tongue basically confirms it. The other woman sneers at her. She mocks the stepmother, saying that since she was just a concubine to an official, her daughter will never be more than a concubine herself. Furious at the curse placed on her daughter's future, the stepmother glares with murderous eyes, warning the woman to watch her mouth unless she wants her head separated from her shoulders. That evening, under the moonlight, the king is practicing his sword work. He stares at his shadow on the ground, but his mind is drifting to So-rang. It's been 2 days. Why hasn't she come back yet? Just as he's thinking of her, So-rang suddenly appears behind him and teases him, asking if he missed her that much. The king, embarrassed, quickly makes up an excuse, saying he only wanted to ask her about tomorrow's weather. So-rang immediately jumps into her fortune teller persona, confidently predicting a sunny day. But the second she says it, thunder rolls across the sky. She quickly corrects herself, saying it will only be a light drizzle. But then, a massive torrential downpour starts soaking them both instantly. The king didn't even have time to scold So-rang for her bad weather forecast. He just bolted toward his bedchamber to dodge the downpour. On the way, he suddenly heard the eerie, mournful sound of a flute. His heart skipped a beat, as he suspected a water ghost was at work, especially since So-rang had previously told him that flute music was a sure sign of a ghost's presence. To keep her act going, So-rang had to play along. She ran toward the source of the sound and stomped on a bamboo flute hidden in the ground, crushing it to pieces. But as she turned to run back, her hair ribbon fell off, leaving her hair disheveled and wild. Seeing her charging at him like that in the dark, the king panicked, accidentally struck her in the head, and they both went splashing into the palace pond. Shinwon immediately dove in and pulled So-rang out, but in his worry, he completely forgot to rescue the king. This left the king feeling incredibly hurt and neglected. Back at the palace that night, the king was still in a sulky mood. To smooth things over, So-rang determinedly helped him change his clothes. As she unbuttoned his collar, she started showering him with compliments about his physique. She told him she must have been blind before because his body was like a sculpted work of art, and that he looked like a literal god when he was practicing with his sword. Seeing the king unable to hide a smug grin, So-rang knew she had hit the bullseye. Once the king was in his pajamas and tucked in, he stared at So-rang with wide eyes, waiting for her to soothe him to sleep. Having run out of folktales, So-rang switched to a Q&A mode to lull him into a slumber. She asked if he had any special memories involving the moon and wine. Hearing this, a vision of himself and Jaeyeon sharing a drink on a boat under the moonlight flashed through the king's mind. But he kept it to himself, because the more beautiful the memory, the more it reminded him of how he failed to truly understand Jaeyeon's heart and her struggles. In his half-asleep state, the king dreamed he was back on that bridge, kissing Jaeyeon, who was waiting for him. However, when he opened his eyes, he was shocked to realize the person he had just kissed was actually So-rang. The kiss caught So-rang completely off guard, but she reacted fast. She pretended she had the rare ability to sleep with her eyes open. She quickly laid down on the floor and refused to wake up, no matter how much he called her name. The king had no choice but to have Shinwon carry her back to her quarters. That night, none of the three could find any peace. The king's heart was racing because he had kissed So-rang. Shinwon was also losing his mind. When he had rescued So-rang from the pond, he had given her mouth-to-mouth CPR, and that kiss had left him utterly confused. As for So-rang, the moment she got back, her eyes popped open. The king's kiss had completely turned her world upside down. The next morning, the villainous Grand Chamberlain's men discovered that their bamboo traps had been destroyed. It turns out, those flutes were secret devices he had buried to create ghostly sounds to torment the king. Seeing the damage, he suspected a high-level expert had appeared by the king's side, and immediately ordered an investigation to find out who broke them. When the king looked out his window the next morning, the sky was actually perfectly clear. It turned out So-rong hadn't lied after all. The king donned his royal hunting gear and led a massive procession out of the city gates. Today, he wanted to show his people exactly what kind of king he really was. A crowd had already gathered along the roads, but the atmosphere was gloomy. The local bachelors and everyone else affected by the ban were fuming with rage every time the king's name was mentioned. If it weren't for the royal decree, they wouldn't have bothered showing up at all. But as the city gates swung open, the king rode through the crowd, looking tall and imposing on his magnificent horse. As the king rode through the gates with a stern and majestic expression, the citizens who were bowing at his feet couldn't help but look up. To their absolute shock, just one look at the king's visuals turned the entire crowd from haters into stans. The single men began wondering why a king this handsome hadn't picked a queen yet, while the women immediately made becoming the next queen their new life goal. That day, So-rong was supposed to be resting, but since she heard there was going to be a fun event like a royal hunt, she followed Shinwan like a lost puppy. Shinwan had no choice but to help her get into a disguise so she could tag along. The king was actually pretty annoyed because according to palace rules, only princesses or concubines were allowed to watch the hunt, and here was So-rong risking her neck just to be there. So-rong immediately turned on the charm, swearing her loyalty and claiming she was there to protect the king at all costs. But let's be real, the only thing she was loyal to was the idea of the massive barbecue feast that always happens after a hunt. Meanwhile, at the edge of the hunting grounds, two men were secretly releasing a wild boar. These were the same citizens who had been complaining about the marriage ban earlier. An official had manipulated them, telling them that if the king managed to hit a boar during the hunt, he'd be so happy that he might just lift the marriage ban on the spot. Little did they know, this official was a secret ally of the villainous Grand Chamberlain. The two men had bought a boar at the market, but they didn't realize just how aggressive it was. The second it was released, it charged into the woods, goring innocent bystanders and causing total chaos. Unfortunately, So-rong became the boar's next target. While running for her life, she tripped over a tree root and fell hard. Seeing the beast charging right at her, her heart sank. In a daze, she hallucinated seeing her late mother coming down to take her to heaven. But then, smack! A slap to the face brought her back to reality. The king and Shinwan had arrived just in time to kill the boar together. The ministers immediately swarmed the king, praising him for being the first to take down a boar. Shinwan and So-rong used the confusion to slip away, but they didn't go unnoticed. Because So-rong was injured and limping, she looked exactly like that zombie-walking maid the military officer had seen before. Suddenly, the light bulb went off in his head. The mysterious expert by the king's side was none other than this new maid. That evening, the boar was served as the main course of a grand banquet. The ministers were happily drinking and gossiping about how the king's spirit seemed much higher than before. They even voiced their hope that a new queen, one even better than Jian, would soon appear. The moment those words were uttered, the music stopped dead. The smile vanished from the king's face. While the ministers were trembling in fear of an outburst, the king suddenly burst out laughing and frankly declared that he too was ready to welcome a new queen. Later that night, because she hadn't taken care of herself, So-rong came down with a high fever. Since palace rules usually forbid doctors from treating lowly maids in the royal quarters, the king secretly brought in a village doctor to treat her. After the doctor left, the king insisted on nursing So-rong himself. He gently stroked her face, and, unable to help himself, he leaned in and kissed her again. But this time, Shinwan walked in and caught them in the act, leaving him visibly upset. From that moment on, the king couldn't get So-rong out of his head. During the days she was sick, every day without her felt like 3 long autumns. When she finally recovered and returned to work, the king tried to subtly fish for information, asking if she remembered anything from when she had the fever. To his disappointment, So-rong seemed to have absolutely no memory of the kiss. On another night shift, the king found himself unable to sleep. Surprisingly, So-rong invited him to have a drink with her. She knew exactly how the king ticked. All it took was a little bit of playful provocation, and the king agreed to the secret drinking session on the spot. Just as So-rong planned, the second she questioned the king's alcohol tolerance, his pride flared up. He was determined to prove her wrong and make her lose the drinking contest. But just drinking wasn't enough. They decided to play a classic Joseon version of Truth or Dare. So-rong kicked things off with a sharp, pointed question. Since Jian passed away, have you loved any other woman? The king hesitated for a moment before answering with a firm no. So-rong was a bit surprised, but she didn't see any reason to doubt him. Then it was the king's turn to grill her. He asked, "What exactly is Shinwan to you?" So-rong played it safe, expressing only gratitude for his protection. She couldn't exactly tell the king that if it weren't for his marriage ban, she'd probably be Shinwan's wife by now. The king saw right through her hesitation. He called her out for lying and made her take a penalty shot of wine. When it was So-rong's turn again, she went for the jugular. "Do you see me as Jian?" Immediately, the memory of that kiss on the bridge flashed through the king's mind, but he lied and said number. So-rong wasn't having it. She demanded he drink the penalty for being obviously dishonest. After knocking back the wine, the king told So-rong not to overthink that kiss, claiming his heart was officially closed for business and he no longer craved love. Hearing this, So-rong made him a bold promise. She swore she would help him find that heart-fluttering feeling again, bragging that she was the top matchmaker in the land. To find a cure for the king's cold heart, she left the palace and headed back to her shop. Just then, a traveling artist arrived, and his collection of spring drawings, aka ancient erotica, spilled all over the ground. Her assistant, Hae-young, immediately screamed pervert, but when So-rong saw the spicy content in those books, her eyes lit up. She realized this was exactly what she needed. She and Xinhuan chased the artist down on horseback, and since the artist only had 2 legs, he didn't get very far. After catching him, So-Rong didn't care about the artist. She was looking at the books like they were buried treasure. She had finally found a way to jumpstart the king's desires. She went to the artist's house and binged through his entire collection. Unlike typical smut, this artist's work had gripping plot lines, which So-Rong loved. She picked out the best ones to smuggle back into the palace. At the city gates, the guards demanded to search her. Even though naughty books were strictly banned, So-Rang skillfully bribed them by leaving 1 book behind, and they let her pass. But getting erotica into the king's actual bedroom was another challenge. After a lot of smooth talking, she finally convinced the palace managers to let her through. That night, the king had another dream about Jiayun. He was excitedly telling her about his hunting success, but in the dream, Jiayun looked miserable. Her neck turned red, and she died right in front of him again. The king woke up in a cold sweat, and So-Rang rushed to comfort him. She accidentally left one of the spicy books near his pillow. But the king was still drowning in the nightmare of Jiayun's death. He flew into a rage, demanding So-Rang take the books and get out. To him, it was an insult to replace his sacred memories of Jiayun with something so vulgar. So-Rang left the bedroom feeling totally defeated. She ended up giving all the spicy books to Xinhuan. That night, Xinhuan couldn't sleep a wink. He felt incredibly uneasy because So-Rang giving him those books was the ultimate friendzone move. It proved she didn't have any romantic feelings for him at all. Drowning in disappointment, Xinhuan decided to open one of the books, just to see what the fuss was about. To his surprise, the content was actually gripping. He ended up getting totally sucked in, staying up all night binge reading the entire collection. Meanwhile, after the king kicked So-Rang out, a servant brought him a bowl of ginseng tea, claiming this specific brew was extra potent. Sure enough, after just 1 sip, the king's body started heating up. As the servant left, he made sure to clear away the spicy books, but he accidentally left one behind. Restless and unable to sleep, the king's eyes wandered to that remaining book. Just like Xinhuan, once he started reading, he couldn't stop. It wasn't just the steamy scenes, the actual plot and the flow of the story were mesmerizing. The king ended up reading every single book left in his room, and even stashed them away as his personal collection. Maybe it was because he spent the whole night immersed in romance stories, but the next day, the king's vibe was totally different. While walking in the back garden, he saw a pair of birds flying together and actually sighed, muttering about the beauty of love. Even looking at red flowers on the ground reminded him of romantic scenes from the books. The servants and maids were absolutely floored. They had never seen the Tyrant King act so poetic. But the mood shifted instantly when he passed the training grounds. He spotted So-Rang and Xinhuan together, and from his angle, they looked incredibly intimate, almost like they were kissing. A sudden, unnameable fire of jealousy flared up in the king's heart. He immediately barked an order for So-Rang to report to his bedchamber. So-Rang rushed over, only to be interrogated about what she and Xinhuan were doing. As it turns out, she just wanted to learn some swordplay from him, and was also teasing him about the books she gave him. But a joke went a little too far. She accidentally tripped into Xinhuan's arms, and that was the exact moment the king walked in. The king was clearly green with envy, suspecting that the two of them had feelings for each other. Right then, So-Rang noticed one of the spicy books neatly tucked on his table. She realized that even though the king acted like he didn't want them, he had clearly read every single one. Regaining her confidence, she teased him, asking if his desires had finally been reawakened and if he was ready to welcome a new queen. To test the king's mood, So-Rang kept leaning closer and closer to him. Just as they were about to kiss again, the king pulled her into a firm embrace and gave her a low, husky warning. Every woman in this palace belongs to me. He told her not to play with fire by using her body to test his limits. His words were so intense and warm that So-Rang left the room with her face bright red and her heart thumping out of her chest. The servants and the head court lady noticed the spark between them and started plotting to play matchmaker. Their logic was simple. If So-Rang and the king officially get together and have a baby, So-Rang becomes a royal concubine, and the 7-year marriage ban finally ends for everyone. To see where the king's heart truly stood, they asked Xinhuan to do some intel gathering. This put Xinhuan in a heartbreaking position. On one hand, he loved her. On the other, the future of the whole country was at stake. With a heavy heart, Xinhuan confronted the king, asking if his mind had been at peace lately. The king gave a very cryptic answer, but his words made it clear that So-Rang's presence had fundamentally changed him. He admitted he was still feeling uneasy, but if he were to truly confirm his love for So-Rang, he would definitely keep her by his side forever. Hearing the king's confession, Xinhuan felt his world crumble. How can a loyal subject ever hope to compete with a king for the woman he loves? It's a losing game from the start. While Xinhuan struggles with his heart, the plot thickens elsewhere. A high-ranking official lies on his deathbed, but his wife, the wicked stepmother, is busy having a secret meeting with the villainous Grand Chamberlain. As she steps out to pretend to give her husband medicine, a servant drops a bombshell. She saw someone at the palace tea house who looks exactly like the long-lost eldest daughter. Panicked, the stepmother rushes to the tea house to see for herself. Luckily, So-Rang's partner spots this uninvited guest just in time. He pulls a fast one on her, pretending to read her fortune and claiming her daughter is destined to be the future queen. The stepmother is so blinded by greed and joy that she completely forgets to look for So-Rang and rushes home to tell her daughter the good news. But the daughter is sharper than her mother. She realizes the fortune said daughter, but didn't specify which one. She knows So-Rang is still a massive threat that needs to be eliminated once and for all. Back at the palace, the night of cohabitation, the night the king and So-Rang are supposed to sleep together, has been officially set. Xinhuan is a nervous wreck. On the day he's supposed to escort So-Rang home for her leave, they receive an urgent letter from her partner. Whatever you do, do not bring her back here. The stepmother is coming for her life. Shinwan immediately pulls a U-turn, but they're hit by an ambush. Assassins are everywhere. Shinwan fights like a man possessed, breaking through the circle and realizing the only safe place for So-Rang is back inside the palace walls. The assassins retreat on orders from the Grand Chamberlain, who claims he has a much more sinister way to deal with the king and So-Rang. Once they're back, the head court lady and the maids go into full makeover mode. They pamper So-Rang, hoping her stunning beauty will finally capture the king's heart for good. The king's bedchamber is transformed into a romantic paradise, overflowing with candles and flower petals. As So-Rang is led toward the room like a future royal consort, she looks so breathtakingly beautiful that the king is momentarily paralyzed. But before she can even step inside, Shinwan suddenly appears. He grabs So-Rang's hand and drags her away without looking back. So-Rang is completely baffled, thinking Shinwan is being incredibly rude and out of line. Seeing her confusion, a desperate Shinwan tells her the truth. Tonight, you've been dressed up with a gift to be handed over to the king. So-Rang is stunned and tries to head back, but Shinwan pulls her into a tight embrace. And standing right behind them is the king, his face pale with fury. He demands to know what Shinwan thinks he's doing. Shinwan gathers every ounce of his courage and declares that he cannot allow So-Rang to serve the king tonight. The king is heartbroken. He doesn't understand why his best friend is choosing to be his enemy. He gives Shinwan an ultimatum. If you want to take her away, you have to go through me in a duel. For Shinwan, this is a path of no return. Whether he wins or loses, he's standing against his king. At first, he only plays defense, but the king takes that as an insult, as if Shinwan is looking down on him. Forced into a real fight, Shinwan gets serious and actually manages to tear a piece of the king's royal robe. The guards immediately swarm in to arrest him, but the king waves them off. He wants a fair fight, man to man. In the end, Shinwan can't bring himself to strike his king and voluntarily surrenders. The king looks him in the eye and asks the ultimate question. At this moment, are you my friend or my romantic rival? Shinwan has no answer. Just then, So-Rang runs out and throws herself at the king's feet. She begs him to spare Shinwan, promising to go back to the bedroom and fulfill her duty. Only when she mentions the cohabitation does the king finally realize what's actually happening tonight. He puts two and two together and realizes the whole romantic night was a secret trap set by the meddling court ladies, who are currently watching the whole drama unfold from the shadows. After returning to the palace, the king surprisingly lets both of them go. He even tells So-Rang, who was supposed to be on night duty, to just leave. But So-Rang doesn't budge. Instead, she finds the courage to literally school the king. She criticizes him for doubting Shinwan's loyalty and tells him he should never have raised a sword against his best friend. She goes as far as telling him that tonight, he's acting like a man blinded by petty jealousy, which is totally beneath the dignity of a king. And then she drops the kicker. Besides, I'm not even your lover. This sets the king off. He grabs her, looming over her as he warns her that every woman in the palace belongs to him, and they are strictly forbidden from having feelings for any other man. So-Rang finally gets the message. Even though the king isn't 100% sure if he likes her, he definitely won't allow her to love anyone else. The next day, the king is ready to fire Shinwan, but the head court lady steps in with some serious pushback. She reveals that during So-Rang's last trip out of the palace, she was actually hunted by assassins, and if it weren't for Shinwan, she'd be dead. Plus, she reminds him that the anniversary of Jaeyeon's death is coming up, and every year at this time, a woman near the king dies. She doesn't want So-Rang to be this year's victim. After thinking it over, the king finally backs down. To stop the fighting between the two men, So-Rang decides to have a real talk with Shinwan. She tells him straight up that they are just friends, that she has never seen him as a romantic interest, and that he needs to stop crossing the line. This cold rejection completely shatters Shinwan's heart. Late that night, the evil stepmother hosts a very important guest, the Grand Queen Mother. Having heard that the stepmother has been training highborn girls in palace etiquette to prepare them for the queen selection, the Grand Queen Mother comes to check them out personally. Under the stepmother's careful orchestration, the Grand Queen Mother is deeply impressed by her daughter and seems very satisfied. Meanwhile, the king summons Shinwan. Their conversation is no longer sharp or angry. He tasks Shinwan with protecting So-Rang, but with one condition: he must stop loving her. This leaves Shinwan feeling conflicted again. He can't help but ask the king, have you finally forgotten Jaeyeon and moved your heart to someone else? But forgetting Jaeyeon is impossible for the king. That night, he dreams of the bridge again, seeing Jaeyeon standing in the mist. She looks unhappy and scolds him for not visiting her. As she speaks, her image starts to fade. She tells him that as his memories of her weaken, her spirit becomes more transparent, eventually doomed to vanish forever. Desperate, the king asks who killed her. He wants revenge before she disappears. But just as she's about to name the killer, she vanishes into thin air. The king bolts awake and immediately demands So-Rang summon Jaeyeon's spirit because he has unfinished business. Even though So-Rang is tired of the act, she can't say no. Her acting skills hit an all-time high as she uses her usual ghostly phrases, hoping the king will stop calling her. But the king demands she finish what she started in his dream and name the killer. So-Rang is in a total bind, but her quick wit saves her. She claims that the dead cannot interfere in the affairs of the living, so her spirit is forbidden from revealing the murderer's identity. The king won't back down, so So-Rang starts arguing with him through Jaeyeon's voice. In a final desperate move to make him let go, she even denies their love, claiming that she only ever felt loyalty toward him, not romance. This time, So-Rang's trick works, but it backfires emotionally. The king is absolutely devastated. He falls into a deep depression for days, unable to accept the fact that the woman he loved so much never actually loved him back. The king begins spiraling into his own thoughts, replaying every memory of Jae-yeon. He realizes that, looking back, her actions didn't really scream love. She was always so tender but incredibly restrained, constantly reminding him to focus on his royal duties instead of their romance. To him, it now feels like she was just being professional. But the king refuses to give up on their past. He actually goes to his father-in-law to get a straight answer, asking point blank, "Did Jae-yeon really love me?" Talk about an awkward question. Who's going to say no to a king? But the father-in-law's hesitation speaks volumes. This only fuels the king's obsession. He is now more determined than ever to get to the bottom of this. Seeing his struggle, So-rang comes up with a plan. She points out that the father-in-law might not have known his daughter as well as the people who were by her side every day. She suggests the king sneak out of the palace with her to track down Jae-yeon's old servants and hear the real tea. Late that night, the king, So-rang, and Shin-won go full undercover. They scale the palace walls and find an old servant who used to care for Jae-yeon. The servant recalls that after the royal selection decree was announced, Jae-yeon cried her eyes out because she didn't want to enter the palace. And after she became queen, she supposedly sent a letter home expressing her anger because the king never let her visit her family. The king is hiding just around the corner, listening to all of this, and his face is a mask of pure misery. Still, he clings to the hope that she must have caught feelings for him once they were living together. So-rang anticipated this, so she brought in a palace maid for a second opinion. This maid doubles down, claiming that Jae-yeon felt more loyalty toward the king than actual love. She even says their daily life as a married couple felt more like a boss-subordinate relationship, just following orders. Hearing this, the king is a total wreck. The sense of loss in his heart is deeper than ever. But here's the plot twist. So-rang actually bribed these witnesses to say those things. Shin-won catches her red-handed paying them off and is disgusted. He threatens to report her to the king immediately. Panicking, So-rang grabs Shin-won's arm and starts acting all cute and pouty, using her charms to beg him for silence. Shin-won, who clearly has a soft spot for her, can't resist and agrees to keep her secret, but he gives her one stern condition: do not fall in love with the king. The next day, Hae-young comes sprinting into the palace, gasping for air, to report a wild rumor spreading through the streets. Apparently, a peasant woman washing clothes by the river at night saw the ghost of the late Jae-yeon. The ghost was just standing there in her full royal ceremonial robes, staring at passersby with a look of absolute heartbreak. While everyone is spooked by Hae-young's story, So-rang's partner steps in and scolds her for fear-mongering. Right then, Shin-won enters the shop to talk to the partner. He wants to know if the partner has any leads on who sent the assassins after So-rang. But the partner just plays it off as a failure of his fortune-telling, telling Shin-won that if he wants to catch the mastermind, he'll just have to wait for the next time they try to kill her and catch them in the act. This investigation leads Shin-won to hear even more rumors about Jae-yeon's ghost haunting the city. A few days later, So-rang returns to the palace. Neither she nor her partner believe the ghost stories. They're convinced someone is intentionally stirring up trouble to mess with the public's head. But then, Hae-young rushes in with more terrifying news. Last night, Jae-yeon's ghost appeared at her own father's house. Her father saw her with his own eyes and is now 100% convinced that his daughter has returned from the grave. Hearing about the ghost sightings, So-rang is more determined than ever to catch this fraud in the act. She and Shin-won start their investigation with the most obvious clue: those flashy royal ceremonial robes. These aren't just any clothes, they are exclusive to the royal family, and your average tailor wouldn't even be allowed to touch them. This leads them to the shop of a high-end royal tailor. During the interrogation, they find a major lead. The tailor once sent a set of these exact robes to Jae-yeon's father. They head straight to the father-in-law's house and dig out a storage box that hasn't been opened in 7 years. Sure enough, the ceremonial robes are tucked neatly inside. But that same night, back at the palace, the king hears a strange noise. He looks out and sees the ghostly image of Jae-yeon, dressed in those very robes, standing right on the surface of the lake. The head court lady and the servants see it too, but in the blink of an eye, she vanishes into thin air. The king nearly loses his mind and tries to sprint toward the lake, but So-rang catches him, holding him tight and comforting him until he snaps out of it. Once he's calm, So-rang drops a truth bomb. She tells him the ghost wandering the streets is a fake, and she's got the receipts to prove it. So-rang brings in the royal tailor and the robes from the father-in-law's box. Here's the mic drop moment. The tailor testifies that the original robes he made for Jae-yeon were embroidered with pure gold thread, but the robes in the box, they're fakes made with silver thread. This is 100% proof that someone stole the real gold-threaded robes to pull off this ghost stunt. Seeing the evidence, the king's grief turns into cold, hard determination. He's ready to hunt down anyone using Jae-yeon's memory like this. The next day, So-rang and Shin-won head back to the lake. So-rang has a hunch. She remembers hearing a distinct splash right when the ghost disappeared. She figures the clue must be underwater. Naturally, the job of diving into the freezing lake falls on Shin-won. He dives down and spots something shimmering. When he hauls it up, it's a massive, person-sized mirror. This was the high-tech trick. The culprit used the mirror to create a blurry, ghostly reflection on the water. This explains why the ghost only appeared near water sources, like wells and rivers. And the figure in the mirror? Definitely a maid in disguise. So-rang realizes there must be a mole within the palace staff. So-rang immediately asks the head court lady to investigate every single maid. But when the news reaches the villainous Grand Chamberlain, he literally laughs out loud. So-rong just walked right into his trap. She forgot one tiny detail. She's a maid too, and a fake one with a totally forged identity. The Grand Chamberlain makes a huge scene and has the palace guards take over the investigation. Unsurprisingly, the crosshairs land right on So-rong. Even though the head court lady tried to forge So-rong's records, the guards have proof that her name doesn't match the official registry. In fact, So-rong isn't even her real name. Shin-won and the court lady can only watch helplessly as So-rong is dragged off to prison. Shin-won manages to visit her in her cell. He's desperate to help, but he tells her he needs her real name to make a move. So-rong stays silent. She can't bring herself to tell him that she's actually his missing fiancé from 7 years ago. Just then, the sound of drums echoes through the palace. It's the day of the king's military departure ceremony. So-rong gets a sudden spark of inspiration. She tells Shin-won to use this ceremony to check every single soldier. The person playing the ghosts doesn't have to be a maid. They could be hiding in the army. But Shin-won looks worried. The military commander in charge today is a close ally of the Grand Chamberlain, and there's no way he'll let Shin-won inspect his troops. There is only one person with a high enough status to bypass the corrupt commander, someone who also knows exactly what Jae-yun looked like. That person is the king himself. The scene shifts to the military grounds. The king looks down at the rows of soldiers from his podium. He makes a sudden proposal. He wants to personally reward each soldier one by one. He steps down and begins inspecting them, face to face. Suddenly, a pair of slender, delicate hands catches his eye. He knows for a fact that a battle-hardened soldier wouldn't have hands like that. On the spot, he knocks the soldier's helmet off. A cascade of long hair falls down, and the woman underneath looks identical to the late Jae-yun. The king is visibly shaken for a moment, but he quickly regains his composure and signals Shin-won to take her away. Meanwhile, word reaches the king that So-rong has vanished. As it turns out, the corrupt palace guards had blindfolded her and dragged her to a secret blast site for a brutal interrogation. They demand to know her real name. Even under severe torture, So-rong refuses to break. The interrogator eventually loses his patience, pressing a sword against her throat and threatening to end her life right then and there. Just as things look hopeless, the king bursts in. Seeing So-rong in such a pathetic, wounded state, he immediately strips off his own royal robe to cover her. The interrogator tries to justify his actions, claiming that So-rong is a fraud who snuck into the palace with a fake identity and malicious intent. But the king steps toward him, inch by inch, and asks, "So what?" He declares that So-rong is a maid of the inner palace he personally appointed. Insulting her is the same as insulting the king himself. With a cold glare, he orders the guards to drag the interrogator away. The second she's released from the torture rack, So-rong faints. The king carries her back to the palace personally. When she finally wakes up, the king is overcome with joy, grateful that she's still breathing. He makes a solemn promise. He will finally try to step out of the shadow of Jae-yun's death. He tells her she doesn't need to be a shaman or medium anymore. She just needs to be herself and stay by his side. With that, he pulls her into a tender, protective embrace. But the peace is short-lived. A servant rushes in with a horrifying report. The woman arrested from the army has been found dead inside the palace. The king rushes to the scene and finds her body staged exactly like Jae-yun's, and it happened on the very anniversary of Jae-yun's death. It seems the annual curse of a woman dying in the palace is unavoidable. But there's a chilling detail. This time, the body wasn't found at the concubine's quarters. It was found right in So-rong's living area. So-rong rushes to the scene as well, but before she can get a clear look at the body hanging there, Shin-won reaches out and covers her eyes, leading her away from the nightmare. He echoes the king's sentiment, telling her how grateful he is that she's safe. But So-rong can't find any joy in it. In previous years, the victims were always women close to the king. She realizes that she was supposed to be the one hanging there. In other words, that woman died in her place, and the guilt starts to eat her alive. Fearing for her life, Shin-won begs So-rong to leave the palace immediately. Even if she can't be with him, he just wants her to be safe. But So-rong refuses. Given how dangerous things have become, she feels she can't possibly abandon the king now. Seeing the unwavering determination in her eyes, Shin-won is forced to let go. The king is genuinely terrified of losing another person he cares about. When So-rong returns to his bedchamber, she finds him broken. She tearfully wipes his face, and the king pulls her close, begging her never to leave him and to stay in the palace with him. So-rong nods through her tears. She realizes she has officially fallen for the king, and even though she knows she's a target, she can't bring herself to walk away. The very next morning, Shin-won returns to the scene of the crime, where the woman was found dead. The fact that she was dumped right at So-rong's doorstep is a massive red flag. It's a clear warning that So-rong is the next target on the killer's list. Shin-won rushes to the prison to interrogate the man they arrested the day before, but he's too late. The witness has already been silenced by the Grand Chamberlain. Looking at the weapon used to kill the witness, Shin-won realizes it's the exact same type used in the previous attempt on So-rong's life. Armed with the truth, he gathers his courage and confronts the Grand Chamberlain, flat out accusing him of the woman's death and the murder of the witness. But the Grand Chamberlain is the definition of arrogant. Even when the king backs Shin-won's theory, the old man doesn't blink. He knows they don't have a shred of hard evidence to pin the crimes on him. This challenge only makes the king more determined. He sends Shin-won on a deep dive investigation into the dead woman's background, and they soon discover she was a kiseng, a courtesan. Tracing her history back a few months, they find out she had been kidnapped and vanished without a trace. Shin-won keeps digging and eventually finds the secret location where the woman was held after being snatched. On the ground, he finds a tiny red jade bead, part of an earring that fell off while the woman was being forced to play the ghost of Jae-yun. As it turns out, the evil stepmother had bought that exact pair of earrings from a street vendor. The pieces of the puzzle finally fit. The Grand Chamberlain and the stepmother are running a ghost factory. The Chamberlain handles the kidnappings, and the stepmother is in charge of the makeover, dressing the girls up to look like Jaeyeon. They use these poor women to spread fear and rumors through the streets every night, and the second the ghost act is exposed, they murder the girl to cover their tracks. Because of the marriage ban, kidnapping women has become a massive underground business. One day, word reaches the palace that a girl from a local family has been snatched. Since So-rang is away, Hae-young becomes everyone's main concern. That night, the naughty book artist tries to escort Hae-young home. He's had a crush on her for a while, but they're ambushed by kidnappers. He can only watch helplessly as Hae-young is dragged away. He sprints back to the palace for help and runs into Shin-won, who is just bringing So-rang home. Shin-won tells So-rang to get inside the house where it's safe, while he and the artist jump on horses to give chase. But in a horrifying twist, So-rang ends up getting kidnapped as well. During the high-speed chase, Shin-won spots a pair of women's shoes tied to one of the horses, the very shoes he had bought as a gift for So-rang. Realizing she's in danger, he goes into beast mode, taking on a whole group of kidnappers by himself. Luckily, the king gets the message and arrives with the cavalry just in time. They storm the kidnappers' hideout, and the small-time thugs are quickly overpowered. Shin-won kicks open the doors of the holding area, but he's met with a heartbreaking sight. Rows and rows of cages filled with kidnapped women. The king and Shin-won frantically scan the crowd as the women are released, but So-rang is nowhere to be found. Just then, one of the rescued women speaks up. She says that the kidnappers brought in a special woman tonight. Unlike everyone else who was crying and begging for mercy, this woman, So-rang, was actually negotiating with the kidnappers. She apparently told them she had a way to sell herself for a much higher price and offered to split the profit with them. Hearing this, Shin-won is 100% sure that's So-rang. Only she would try to hustle her own kidnappers. However, nobody knows where they took her next. With no leads, Shin-won first focuses on getting the other women to safety. Suddenly, a guard who's in love with Hae-young spots several tiny, transparent stones scattered on the grass, a gift he had given to her. He's convinced Hae-young dropped them on purpose to leave a breadbox trail. Following the trail of stones, they arrive at a wealthy noble's estate. Facing the royal soldiers, the nobleman acts completely chill, inviting them to search wherever they want. But it's all a front. The soldiers and the artist eventually find Hae-young hidden away in a warehouse. As they try to lead her out, the noble drops the act, draws his sword, and tries to keep her by force. The artist and the guard are no match for him and are knocked down in seconds. At the last possible moment, the king and Shin-won burst in, easily defeating the noble and rescuing Hae-young. Seeing the king being such a hero, Hae-young's face turns bright red. While all this was going on, So-rang had been handed over to the Grand Chamberlain, who took her straight to her evil stepmother's house. The second the stepmother saw So-rang alive, she went into a total panic and wanted her dead on the spot. The Grand Chamberlain was all for it. In fact, he had a sick psychological game in mind. He planned to kill So-rang and dump her body right outside the king's bedroom door, just to break the king's mental state. As they were laughing about their twisted plan, the stepmother asked for one more favor. She wanted the Chamberlain to kidnap every other noble daughter in the city. Since these girls were all potential rivals for her own daughter in the upcoming queen selection, she wanted to eliminate the competition early. But right as she finished speaking, the head kidnapper burst in with terrible news. The royal guard had completely wiped out their organization. Realizing the heat was on, the Chamberlain and the stepmother decided to flee, but not before giving a final, chilling order to their henchmen. They ordered them to kill So-rang tonight and make sure her body was thrown inside the palace walls. The kidnappers immediately started moving So-rang, but on the way, they were ambushed by a group of mountain bandits. A massive brawl broke out between the two groups. During the chaos, So-rang woke up, but seeing how dangerous the situation was, she decided to keep her eyes shut and play dead. By midnight, royal spies reported the skirmish on the mountain road to the palace. Fearing the worst, the king and Shin-won led their troops toward the bandit camp, both men silently praying that So-rang was still breathing. Meanwhile, the defeated kidnappers reported So-rang's capture to the Grand Chamberlain. He was furious and ordered his remaining forces to go back and take her back by any means necessary. When So-rang finally woke up in the bandit camp, she found herself surrounded by a rough-looking crowd. She immediately jumped into a defensive stance, which actually startled the bandits. Just then, a man with a distinct wavy hair perm stepped forward and gave her a polite smile. It turned out this guy was the leader of the bandits, but he wasn't a villain at all. He took her on a tour of their village, a hidden paradise deep in the mountains. He explained that he had been rescuing women from kidnappers for years, and even helped couples who were being torn apart by the marriage ban. They could live and love freely in his secret village. Hearing this, So-rang realized they were basically colleagues. She told him about her own shop, the Palace, where she did the exact same thing for couples in the city. Once she realized he was a good guy, she asked to leave, but the leader politely turned her down. To keep the village's location a secret from the government, he couldn't let her go just yet. So-rang, being the social butterfly she is, blended in instantly. She started doing fortune-telling for all the villagers and became the life of the party. While she was in the middle of a massive crowd of happy villagers, the king and Shin-won finally tracked her down. Seeing her surrounded by bandits, they assumed she was being attacked. They charged in with their swords drawn, leading the royal guards in a full-on assault. But these mountain bandits were no joke. They were incredible fighters. In a humiliating turn of events, the king and Shin-won were quickly overpowered and tied up. To prove that the king and Shin-won weren't a threat to the village, So-rang had to break out her legendary Spirit Possession Act one more time. After performing a flashy divine dance, she suddenly shifted her voice and called the bandit leader brother. The leader was stunned and cautiously tested her to see if this was really the spirit of his late sister. So-rong didn't miss a beat. She started talking about their tragic past and how she had been kidnapped years ago. She told him that it was because of that trauma that he had dedicated his life to rescuing others. She looked him in the eye and told him he was a good man and that her death wasn't his fault. Her acting was so incredibly moving that within a few sentences, the tough bandit leader was reduced to a puddle of tears. Seeing that she had successfully gained his absolute trust, So-rong got straight to the point. She begged him to release the king and Shinwan, swearing that they were good men too. Naturally, the wavy-haired bandit leader wasn't about to disobey his sister's spirit. He immediately ordered his men to untie the king and Shinwan, and he didn't stop there. He treated them like VIP guests, giving them a full tour of the village. The king was stunned by what he saw. A peaceful community where everyone lived in harmony, couples were happily married, and children were playing without a care in the world. Having spent years seeing only the misery caused by his own laws, the king couldn't help but let out a genuine, satisfied smile. Seeing how well things were going, the other bandits started acting a bit shy. It turns out, after seeing So-rong's supernatural skills, they wanted in on the action too. They wanted her to find them wives. Even though they were rough-and-tumble outlaws, they were all lonely hearts looking for love. So-rong, being the ultimate hype woman, patted her chest and made a bold promise. "No problem at all. This handsome gentleman in the red robe next to me will make all your dreams come true." She told them he was going to organize a massive blind date with all the eligible maids from the palace. The bandits were hyped, but they were also a bit confused. Who was this guy in the red robe that he could just snap his fingers and bring in palace maids? So-rong kept the joke going, telling them that the king was actually a secret royal matchmaker working undercover in the palace. She claimed he had endured all sorts of humiliation just to protect his identity while helping people find love. Just then, the royal guard reinforcements came charging in. To prevent a full-blown bloodbath between his guards and his new bandit friends, the king was forced to drop the act and reveal his true identity. When the bandits realized they were standing face-to-face with the actual king of Choson, they were starstruck. They claimed he literally started radiating light. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the head court lady and the staff were desperately trying to cover for the king's absence by claiming he was under the weather. But the villainous Grand Chamberlain saw right through it. He seized the opportunity to stir up a rebellion, telling other officials that the king was haunted by the late queen's curse, had abandoned his duties, and was neglecting the country for his own private affairs. The corrupt military officer even declared it was time to dump the king and pick a better leader. He was so confident because he had secretly ordered a group of mercenaries to attack the bandit village, hoping the king would get caught in the crossfire. But his plan totally backfired. He never expected the king and the bandits to become best friends. The king returned to the palace safe and sound and immediately started cleaning house. The king stripped the military officer of his power, using the excuse that he had lost control over the bandit hunting units. This was just the first step in the king's new grand reform plan. And here was the biggest shocker. He officially announced he would lift the marriage ban within the year, a promise he had made back at the bandit village. The military officer noticed the massive change in the king's mindset and realized it was all because of So-rong. He asked the king point blank, "Did you change because you've actually fallen in love with her?" But when it came to his feelings, the king started acting like a shy, awkward teenager in love. He dodged the question, eventually admitting he cared for her but insisted it wasn't love. Yeah, right. That evening, the king was taking a bath. So-rong pushed the doors open and told all the other maids to get out, saying she needed to speak with him privately. Once they were alone, So-rang thanked the king from the bottom of her heart, knowing he had risked everything and left the palace just to save her. The king, in turn, thanked her. He told her that thanks to her, he discovered the hidden paradise of the bandit village and realized just how wrong he had been in the past. After they finished being all polite, So-rang started helping him wash. But as the king looked at her silhouette by the water's edge, his feelings, the ones he had been trying so hard to deny, suddenly boiled over. He lost all control, pulled So-rang into the water with him, and kissed her passionately. But in a total twist, So-rang shoved him away. She acted furious, accusing him of not actually loving her. She shouted that he was just using her because he was still obsessed with a ghost of the late queen and couldn't let go. With that, she stormed out of the bathhouse, leaving the king soaking wet and completely stunned. However, the real reason So-rang stormed out of the bathhouse wasn't just anger, it was because she had recently had a secret meeting with the Grand Queen Mother. The Grand Queen Mother had been watching her closely and gave her a cold ultimatum. If So-rang agreed to serve as her pawn, she would help her become one of the king's official concubines. But if she refused, there would be no reason to keep her in the palace. So-rang, being the ultimate independent spirit, chose neither. She didn't want to be anyone's puppet, she wanted to decide her own fate. Later, while she was sitting in the courtyard lost in thought, Shinwan arrived and gently draped a cloak over her shoulders. He vowed to always be her silent protector, no matter what, which deeply touched So-rang's heart. The next day, Shinwan tracked down a street jeweler. He showed him the red gemstone that had fallen off the woman pretending to be the late queen's ghost. The jeweler checked his records and confirmed the buyer was none other than the evil stepmother. Shinwan immediately led a raid on her house, but because he was once technically engaged to the stepmother's eldest daughter, he felt conflicted and stayed in the background during the search. His men eventually found the hidden jewelry stashed in a medicine warehouse, but just as they were about to seize it, the cunning stepmother appeared, trying to bribe the officers with a pile of expensive jewels to look the other way. Ever since So-rang rejected the king in the bathhouse, her words have been haunting him. He couldn't even focus on his royal duties. By now, the king was 100% certain. He didn't care for So-rang because of some ghost. He loved her for exactly who she was. He was acting like a totally smitten teenager. He desperately wanted to be near her, but didn't want to make it too obvious, so he used every excuse in the book, like food testing or sleep duty, just to keep her by his side. Before, So-Rong's presence helped him sleep, but now just having her there made his heart race so fast he couldn't close his eyes. When she finally drifted off, the king happily tucked her into his own bed, feeling totally content just sharing his pillows and blankets with the woman he loved. The next morning, the king woke up to the sight of So-Rong's sleeping face and let out a gentle, love-struck smile. He sneaked out of the room and ordered all the servants to be deathly quiet so they wouldn't wake her up. Even though he hadn't slept much, his face was literally glowing, making it obvious to all the servants that he was under the power of love. While working, the king confessed to his closest advisor that he had officially given his heart away. But now he faced a major crisis. How on earth was he supposed to confess his feelings to her? The advisor got so hyped that he pushed all the official paperwork aside to give the king some love doctor advice. Meanwhile, So-Rang woke up in the king's bed. She knew she could only be there if the king had allowed it, but she was still a nervous wreck. She scrambled out of the bedroom and ran straight into Xinwan. He mentioned that the palace was currently finalizing the list of maids who were allowed to leave royal service, and he offered to put her name on it. But So-Rang didn't give him a straight answer. She argued that there were still people outside trying to kill her, and the kidnapping case wasn't fully closed, so leaving the palace was still too dangerous. Xinwan told her not to worry and promised to keep her safe, but deep down, So-Rang was already making her own decision. At the same time, the king was rushing to put his grand confession plan into motion. He decided to take a trip to a secondary royal villa for a relaxing getaway, and naturally, he insisted on bringing So-Rang along. But when she heard the news, she wasn't excited at all. She only agreed out of a sense of duty as a maid. This left the king feeling incredibly anxious, terrified that his confession was going to flop. However, he had much bigger problems to worry about. Xinwan's investigation into the kidnapping ring had expanded all the way to the stepmother's house, forcing her to run to the Grand Chamberlain for a desperate new plan. The Grand Chamberlain, knowing the king was about to travel with Xinwan, decided to plant assassins in the entourage to turn the romantic getaway into a bloody ambush. The king's advisor is busy playing love guru, planning a grand confession featuring a romantic but honestly pretty cliché love poem. The king just cringes, doubting if these old-school literary tricks will work on a woman as unique as So-Rang. But the advisor is overconfident, swearing that no woman can resist the double attack of fresh flowers and poetry. While they're debating this, a servant brings in the official list of maids scheduled to leave royal service. The king scans the names, and his heart stops. So-Rang's name is right there. He completely freezes, forgets all about the poem, and sprints to her quarters. The second he sees her, he shuts the whole idea down, forbidding her from leaving. So-Rang is annoyed, thinking he's being totally unreasonable and illogical. But the king can't tell her the real reason yet. He's determined that she can't leave until he officially confesses his feelings. Fast forward to their arrival at the royal villa. The advisor has brought a literal mountain of flowers to decorate the confession spot. But the king is still sulking from the fight with So-Rang. He's in a dark mood, even thinking about calling the whole thing off. He tells himself that if she's truly this desperate to escape him, maybe he should just let her go. However, the advisor gives him a glimmer of hope. Maybe she's leaving for a different reason, not because of you. This recharges the king's batteries, and he orders the staff to get those flowers ready. Meanwhile, So-Rang and Xinwan are standing on a small bridge, taking in the view. Knowing she's signed the papers to leave, Xinwan drops his own bombshell. He's going to resign from his position to fulfill his vow to protect her. This trip is officially his last mission. So-Rang gives him a gentle, heartfelt hug, thanking him for being such a loyal and steady companion by her side. After Xinwan leaves, the king steps out from the shadows. He asks her straight up, "Are you leaving because of me?" So-Rang bursts into tears. She's brutally honest, admitting that she loves him too, but she feels like her heart is the only sincere one. She tells him his attitude has always been so hot and cold, and she's terrified he only sees her as a replacement for Jian. Hearing this, the king immediately shuts her down. He pours his heart out, declaring his true feelings. He tells her he doesn't see her as a shadow of anyone else. In his mind and in his heart, the only person he loves is So-Rang. After this epic confession, he begs her not to leave him and seals the deal with another kiss. That evening, the king leads So-Rang to the flower field he prepared. He hands her a stunning bouquet, and she accepts it with a soft smile, pulling him into a hug. The advisor and the staff see that the mission was a success and finally set off the fireworks. The brilliant lights exploding in the night sky make the whole moment feel like something out of a fairy tale. Not far away, Xinwan watches the fireworks with a heavy, complicated heart. He wonders what the king is celebrating and if it has anything to do with So-Rang. After finishing his night patrol rounds, he tracks down the subordinate who raided the stepmother's house. He asks if they really found zero evidence. The subordinate acts super nervous. It's obvious he took a bribe and insists they found nothing. Xinwan isn't buying it. He immediately suspects that someone tipped the stepmother off so she could move the goods, or worse, there's a mole deep inside the royal guard. Now that the king and So-Rang are officially a couple, they spend the night lying together, sharing their origin stories of when they first fell in love. The king can't even pick just one moment. He tells her that from the very second she appeared in his life, every little thing she did left a deep mark on him, slowly but surely winning over his heart, step by step. The king confesses that the exact second he knew it was true love was when he saw So-Rang sleeping in front of him. For him, just looking at the peaceful face of the woman he loves is enough to make him the happiest man alive. And get this, it's mutual. So-Rang realized she loved him for the exact same reason, his sleeping face. They drift off to sleep in each other's arms, their joy filling every corner of the royal villa. But while they're in paradise, a tragedy is unfolding just outside. Xinhuan's subordinate is dying right in front of him. In a final act of loyalty, the subordinate took a poison needle from an assassin meant for Xinhuan, sacrificing himself to prove he wasn't a traitor. With his last breath, he begs Xinhuan to forget about him and go protect the king. The nightmare doesn't end there. An assassin hidden in the shadows fires a poison arrow, and Xinhuan is hit. He collapses in agony, the image of So-Rong being the last thing on his mind as the poison spreads. The king hears the commotion, rushes out with his guards, and finds his best friend on the verge of death. Fearing these are his final moments, Xinhuan gasps out one last request. Please, truly love and take care of So-Rang for the rest of your life. The group frantically rushes back from the villa. Xinhuan survives, but the poison leaves one of his arms completely paralyzed. After paying his final respects to his fallen subordinate, a broken Xinhuan packs his bags and leaves the palace in secret. He knows he's now a target, and with only one working arm, he feels he can no longer protect anyone. Not wanting to be a burden to the king and So-Rang, he chooses to disappear. Xinhuan's departure leaves both the king and So-Rang in deep sorrow. The king can't stand to see So-Rang so miserable, so he spends his nights by her side, comforting her until she falls asleep. He constantly sends out search parties to find Xinhuan, but there's no trace of him. Meanwhile, the evil stepmother hasn't given up the hunt either. She knows Xinhuan has evidence of her human trafficking business, and she can't let him get away. But even her spies come up empty-handed. While the stepmother is fuming, the Grand Chamberlain stops by to congratulate her. Even though they lost their business deal, he says their long-term master plan is ready to launch. He explains that after the kidnapping scandal, the king will be forced to lift the marriage ban immediately, and once the ban is gone, the grand selection for a new queen must begin. The stepmother's eyes light up. This is the golden ticket for her daughter to take the throne. The next day, the Grand Chamberlain officially proposes the queen selection in court. The king gets a bad feeling. He knows this villain wouldn't be so proactive unless he had a trap ready. The king is firm. So-Rong is the only one he will ever marry. However, his advisor has a different idea. He suggests that if So-Rong were to get pregnant first, they could skip the whole selection process and make her queen directly. The king is totally flustered, arguing that they're still just in the dating phase, and that's a bit too fast. The advisor tells him they're running out of time and suggests a high-stakes date night to move things along. Following the advisor's tip, the king takes So-Rong undercover to a bustling commoner's market. So-Rong is hyped, but not for the romance. She's focused on the profit. She tells the king she's going to show him the true joy of making bank. They brought some high-quality silks from the palace and set up a stall. Whenever a young woman walks by, So-Rong skillfully weaves wish knots for them on the spot. In Joseon, these knots represent beautiful wishes for love, and soon their stall is swarmed by every girl in the city. Watching the commoners buy wish knots with such hope, praying for the marriage ban to finally end, the king is deeply moved. He even tries his hand at weaving one, but let's just say his first attempt is a total disaster. It's the ugliest knot you've ever seen. Meanwhile, So-Rang is making bank. Her business is booming, and they quickly sell out of all the silk. Afterward, the two of them spend their hard-earned cash having a blast playing games and exploring the market. They eventually reach a temple dedicated to finding love, which is covered in knots hung by hopeful girls. So-Rang insists the king weave another knot to hang up. She tells him that no matter how ugly it is, it's their prayer. But just as they hang it, soldiers appear in the distance. Reality check, the marriage ban hasn't been officially lifted yet, so privately praying for marriage is still a crime. So-Rang bolts, and the king, though annoyed by his own laws, has no choice but to run away with her. Despite the chase, it was a perfect day. Riding that wave of romance, the king asks So-Rang to stay the night in his bedchamber. But So-Rang shuts him down. She's brutally honest. She has no legal name, no family, and no parents. She tells him a nobody like her doesn't deserve to be by a king's side. The king is stunned. He never thought about it from that perspective. So-Rang leaves him there to think long and hard before making a real commitment. The day for the maids to leave the palace arrives, and in a shocking twist, the head court lady is on the list too. It turns out she's been worried sick about her missing husband and children and wants to use her freedom to find them before it's too late. So-Rang is devastated. The two people she trusted most, the court lady and Xinhuan, are both gone. The court lady comforts her, reminding her that she has the most powerful man in the country as her lover, so she has nothing to fear. Later, the king's scouts return with news. They found Xinhuan, but he spotted them. He sent a message back to the king. Stop looking for me. Wanting to cheer the king up, the advisor leads him to a special outdoor tent he's prepared, calling it a love nest for the king and So-Rang. The king is skeptical. The palace has hundreds of rooms, so why a tent? The advisor argues that since So-Rang is used to a wandering life, she'll love the glamping vibe. The king decides to trust him, just this once. Feeling anxious about the date, he even sneaks out in the middle of the night to pick a bouquet of flowers and leaves them at So-Rang's door. The next morning, So-Rang finds the flowers, and her mood instantly skyrockets. She heads to the king's room and starts showering him with kisses. Each kiss makes the king's heart flutter more, and he has to struggle to stay composed amidst all that sweetness. Meanwhile, as promised, the head court lady leads the former maids to the bandit village. A blind date event is definitely happening, but first, the bandits need a serious makeover, otherwise no maid would ever look at them. But the lady's help comes with a price. The bandits must help her find her lost husband. That night, the king invites So-Rang to the outdoor tent for drinks and a chat. She's all for it. She actually loves the setup. Over wine, So-rong starts reminiscing about the past. She laughs about how she used to smuggle naughty books into his room to jumpstart his libido. The king is caught off guard by her bringing up such spicy memories. But So-rong is a smart girl. She knows exactly what the king's intentions are for tonight, and she's just as ready. Under the influence of the wine, she leans in and kisses him. The two of them collapse onto the bed in a passionate embrace. Back at his home, Shin-won is preparing for a quiet life with his family. However, while unpacking, he finds a mysterious box. Curious, he opens it and realizes it's not his. Inside is a portrait. When he unfurls it, his heart stops. The girl in the painting looks exactly like So-rang, but the signature at the bottom isn't So-rang. It's the name of the woman he was supposed to marry 7 years ago. In that instant, everything clicks. The reason he was so obsessed with So-rang is because she is his long-lost fiancée. Desperate to confirm the truth, Shin-won heads to the stepmother's house, but he's walking straight into a lion's den. The stepmother, who has been hunting him down to eliminate him, sees him coming. She immediately orders her henchmen to arm themselves and drugs the master of the house to make sure no one hears a sound when they take Shin-won out. Shin-won enters the stepmother's estate and places the portrait of So-rang and his marriage arrangement on the table. The stepmother offers no excuses and immediately admits that So-rang is indeed her eldest daughter and that everything about her current life is a forgery. She reveals that So-rang never possessed any magical abilities and all her reasons for staying by the king's side were a web of lies. Hearing this, Shin-won stumbles out, completely lost and devastated. Yet, seeing his frail and broken state, the stepmother decides not to go through with her plan to assassinate him. A man who has lost an arm and his confidence is no longer capable of stirring up any trouble. After their night together, So-rang suddenly receives word from outside the palace that her business partner has fallen into a high fever and is delirious, drifting in and out of consciousness. Deeply worried, So-rang leaves the palace the next day to nurse her. Upon arriving, in a feverish haze, her partner suddenly starts calling So-rang the queen. Seeing just how severe the fever is, So-rang is forced to write a letter to the king, telling him she will be back a few days late. While nursing her, So-rang runs into Shin-won. He reveals that he has uncovered her true identity and asks why she kept it a secret. So-rang offers a sad smile, explaining that she desperately wanted to forget who she once was. She says that remembering would only drown her in bitterness because she lost everything: her name, her identity, and her family. She tells Shin-won that while he only lost a bride, she lost her entire existence. Shin-won then brings up her so-called divine powers. As the stepmother claimed, her spiritual abilities were completely fabricated. Her possession by the spirit of Jaehyun was nothing more than a brilliant performance by So-rang. Little do they know, as these words leave her lips, the king, who had just walked through the door, hears everything. The king is completely blindsided and stunned. He immediately issues an order banning So-rang from the palace. While the king is shocked by her deception, he doesn't even have time to confront her because the stepmother has already ratted her out to the Grand Queen Mother, exposing So-rang as a con artist who wormed her way into the king's life with malicious intent. The Grand Queen Mother gives the king two choices: either bring So-rang back to the palace to face judgment and punishment, or have her disappear as if she never existed. After agonizing over the decision, the king chooses the latter. That very night, he leaves the palace for the sole purpose of breaking this news to So-rang, personally casting away the woman he loves, leaving his heart in tatters. That night, he cannot sleep, sitting by his bed and crying in silence. So-rang is equally devastated, weeping through the night. Perhaps from the very moment they met, this whole romance was destined to be a mistake. So-rang continues to stay at the tea house to care for her partner. That night, just as she walks into her partner's room, the supposedly delirious partner suddenly sits up and screams at the top of her lungs for So-rang to run. So-rang is completely baffled, thinking her partner is just hallucinating from sickness. But the second she steps out into the courtyard, she is ambushed by a group of men in black. She sprints for her life, fleeing deep into the forest. However, she finds herself trapped at the edge of a cliff, which brings back horrific, traumatizing memories of her fleeing from her home all those years ago. The black-clad assassins hired by the stepmother corner her at the edge of the precipice, just as they did that day. The truth proves that history is repeating itself. These assassins were indeed sent by the stepmother, determined not only to eliminate the woman the king loves, but to bury her own dark past forever. The stepmother is set on destroying So-rang. Thus, So-rang is pushed off the cliff once again. Shin-won, who had rushed there to save her, witnesses the entire horror. Refusing to let her go, he dives directly into the river to save her. But with his injured arm, he is completely powerless to move. Shin-won cannot bring So-rang back to the shore. After a grueling struggle in the water, they both gradually lose consciousness. However, this time it seems that fate has finally taken pity on So-rang and Shin-won, as the river currently washes both of them to the riverbank, where a kind family finds and takes them in. Believe it or not, the life or death struggle in the river ended up being a miracle for Shin-won. As he fought the current to save So-rang, the intense physical strain actually stimulated the nerves in his paralyzed arm, the ones damaged by the poison, and he suddenly regained full movement. Shin-won woke up soon after, but So-rang wasn't so lucky. She remained in a deep coma for days. Back in the palace, the king receives the grim report that So-rang and Shin-won were missing and presumed dead. He lost all his fire and spiraled into a dark depression once again. But losing So-rang actually led the king to a massive epiphany. He finally understood why she had lied about her spiritual powers. He realized that he had been so dangerously obsessed with Jaehyun that if So-rang hadn't used the supernatural angle, he never would have been able to escape his grief. Her lies were actually an act of pure kindness. She was the one who pulled him out of his collapse, healed his wounds, and gave him a reason to live again. He realized his love for her had nothing to do with Jaehyung's ghost. It was her genuine warmth and spirit that he couldn't live without. Just as he was drowning in regret, a mysterious letter arrived at the palace. The king's eyes widened as he read it. It looked like there was finally a major plot twist on the horizon. Meanwhile, in a side plot, a resident artist finally gathered the courage to confess his feelings to Haeyoung, but he got brutally friend-zoned. Heartbroken, he channeled all that pain into his work, staying up all night to write a tragic romance novel about unrequited love. The book became an instant bestseller the second it hit the streets. The tragic story moved the public so much that their anger toward the marriage ban reached a boiling point. Seeing the momentum, the artist and his crew dropped Volume 2. With the book's massive success, the protests became so loud that even the Grand Queen Mother was rattled. She rushed to find the king to discuss lifting the ban, but found him in a pathetic state, drunk, ignoring his duties, and acting even worse than he did after Jaehyung's death. The Grand Queen Mother immediately grilled the king's closest advisor about his condition. The advisor was blunt. He told her that So-rong had been targeted and harmed by assassins the second she left the palace. He pointed out that if she had been allowed to stay under the king's protection, this tragedy never would have happened, and the shock of her death was what broke the king. Hearing this, the Grand Queen Mother, the very person who demanded So-rong be expelled, looked absolutely horrified. The advisor noticed her reaction and reported it back to the king. It turned out the king's madness was all just an act. He told his advisor that whoever manipulated the Grand Queen Mother into kicking So-rang out was likely trying to seize control of the queen selection process. He ordered a full investigation into everyone around the Grand Queen Mother. Late that night, Shinwan was busy spying on the stepmother when he noticed a shadow lurking behind him. He prepared for a fight, only to realize the person following him was the king himself. It turns out the mysterious letter the king received was from Shinwan. The king was overjoyed to see his friend alive and well, especially seeing his arm was healed. He once again invited Shinwan to return to the palace and help him, but Shinwan had other things to handle first. As for So-rang, she had been taken in by a kind family called the Sungs. Their daughter was also named Haeyoung, a gentle girl who always wore a mask over her face. Thanks to this new Haeyoung's round-the-clock care, So-rang finally woke up. The two became fast friends, and So-rang often poured her heart out to her, talking about how much she missed the king. Even though she feared he would never forgive her for the lies, her love for him was stronger than ever. The new Haeyoung comforted her, telling her that loving someone is never a mistake, and she shouldn't be so hard on herself. Later, Shinwan visited So-rang and told her about his secret meeting with the king. He revealed that he had actually turned down the king's offer to return to the palace. Through everything they had been through, Shinwan had finally accepted the relationship between the king and So-rang. He told her that she, more than anyone, deserved to be by the king's side. He believed that their separation only brought pain, and since they were the two people he cherished most, he wanted them to find their way back to the joy and laughter they used to share. So-rang was deeply moved by his selflessness, and they made a pact to remain best friends forever. The next day, the masked Haeyoung dropped a bombshell on So-rang. She revealed that the stepmother had founded the Women's Aspiration Society, a group that supposedly trains noble daughters for the queen selection. However, it was all a sinister front. After being trained, these girls were being targeted by kidnappers, packaged up, and sold off into human trafficking. The scars on Haeyoung's face were a chilling reminder of the time she was kidnapped. Hearing this, So-rang immediately connected the dots and figured out the stepmother's master plan. The Women's Aspiration Society was nothing but a smokescreen. The real goal was for kidnappers to snatch away every highborn girl who stood in the way, clearing a path so the stepmother's younger daughter could waltz into the position of queen. So-rang was beyond furious. This woman hadn't just tried to kill her multiple times, she was ruining the lives of innocent girls all over the country. So-rang decided right then and there to come out of hiding and put an end to the stepmother's reign of terror. The day of the grand selection arrived, and eligible girls gathered from every corner of the land. Even though Haeyoung had a scar on her face, she still qualified to enter. So-rang begged her to let her tag along as her personal mate so they could infiltrate the palace together. Near the palace gates, the stepmother's younger daughter caught a glimpse of So-rang and was absolutely paralyzed with shock to see her alive. So-rang didn't even bother with a disguise. She looked her sister dead in the eye and called out her name with a cold, vengeful stare. On the first day of the selection, the challenge was embroidery. The younger daughter had already bribed the palace officials to swap her mediocre work with Haeyoung's masterpiece. As a result, the younger daughter snatched all the credit and received high praise from the Grand Queen Mother. Haeyoung could only return home in tears, feeling the weight of the injustice. She told So-rang and Shinwan what happened, and the scariest part was that every maid and official in that room knew it was a scam, but they all stayed silent. Looking at the situation, it was clear the stepmother had bought off almost everyone involved in the selection. If they wanted to stop her, they had to expose the bribery ring. Shinwan sat in deep thought. Seeing the corruption happening right under his nose, he knew he had to act. He officially returned to the king's side. He informed the king about the blatant cheating in the selection, and together they prepared to hunt down every dirty official in the palace. The king managed to convince the Grand Queen Mother to let him lead the investigation personally, arguing that a queen selection must be 100% pure and without scandal. Very quickly, the people Shinwan caught for taking bribes were hauled in, but these people were prepared. They claimed the bribes were given to them by officials who had already left the palace. Shinwan knew they were lying through their teeth, but without hard proof, he couldn't push back yet. That evening, the king sent for So-rang to be brought back to the palace. After so many days apart, both of them were a bundle of nerves. So-rang was practicing how to apologize, but the king wasn't even angry. The second she stepped through the door, he pulled her into a crushing hug and kissed her. So-rong burst into tears, apologizing over and over for the lies, but the king had forgiven her a long time ago. He told her that if it wasn't for that original lie, she never would have come into his life. Compared to the love they shared, nothing else mattered. The king also cried, hoping this reunion would be forever and that she would never leave his side again. Despite having her embroidery stolen, Hae-young had made a huge impression on the Grand Queen Mother during the interview phase, thanks to her quick wit and intelligence. Shin-won predicted that with the stepmother's personality, she wouldn't let a rival like Hae-young stay in the game. He knew the kidnappers would come for her next. And he was right. That night, a group of men in black sneaked into Hae-young's quarters and snatched her. However, when they got back to their camp, they got the surprise of their lives. The girl they kidnapped was actually Shin-won in disguise. Shin-won immediately went to work, taking down the kidnappers, and luckily, reinforcements arrived just in time to wipe out the organization once and for all. The next morning, the stepmother's younger daughter was feeling herself, getting ready for the day with total arrogance. While brushing her hair, the maid accidentally pulled a bit too hard. The daughter flew into a rage, giving the maid a look that said she'd have her head. The terrified maid quickly started calling her Your Majesty the Queen to calm her down, which finally made the bratty girl smile with satisfaction. In the younger daughter's mind, with her mother pulling the strings behind the scenes, the queen's crown is practically already on her head. She's walking around like she owns the place. As the next round of the selection begins, she has another run-in with Hae-young at the gate. Noticing that Hae-young and some other girls aren't following the usual route into the palace, the younger daughter starts picking a fight again. But Hae-young doesn't flinch. She boldly announces that since someone was trying to murder her outside the palace, she got special permission to stay inside for the night. When the younger daughter refuses to let it go, Hae-young hits her with a massive burn. It's honestly hilarious how someone who cheats their way through life has the nerve to criticize others. The younger daughter is totally speechless and can only stomp into the selection hall in a fit of rage. Today's test is the tea ceremony. So-rang is watching the officials hand out the tea sets like a hawk, and she notices something suspicious. She immediately signals Hae-young, "Do not drink the tea." Hae-young gets the message and only pretends to bring the cup to her lips. Seconds later, another girl screams in agony. After just one sip, her body is covered in a horrific, angry rash. Everyone panics, thinking it's a sudden outbreak of the plague. The officials rush the girl away, and even the Grand Queen Mother is shaken by the idea of a disease in the middle of the palace. That's when So-rang whispers to Hae-young, "That's not a plague, it's lacquer poisoning." Hae-young notices the younger daughter staring at her in shock, wondering why Hae-young didn't collapse. That look tells Hae-young everything she needs to know. Her sister was the one who poisoned the tea. Hae-young stands up and tells the Grand Queen Mother the truth. When the Queen Mother looks skeptical, Hae-young picks up her cup and says that if she drinks it and gets a rash, it proves someone is trying to poison the candidates. Just as she's about to take a sip, the Grand Queen Mother stops her, declaring that the investigation will take place after the selection round is over. After the tea ceremony, the top 3 candidates are announced, and of course, the younger daughter is on the list. But there's a final twist. The Grand Queen Mother gives every candidate a ballot to rank the top 3. This peer review is crucial. The younger daughter starts sweating. She's been a total mean girl to everyone, and while many were too scared of her mother to speak up before, the ballots are secret. Sure enough, when the votes are tallied, the ranking is flipped upside down. Hae-young, the one who actually stood up to the bully, takes the number 1 spot. But then, the Grand Queen Mother suddenly orders all the maids to stay behind. She wants to inspect everyone's hands to find the person who handled the lacquer poison. This is a disaster for So-rang. When the incident happened earlier, she had touched the victim's cup to sniff out the poison, and now her own fingers are breaking out in a rash. The Grand Queen Mother sees the marks and immediately has So-rang hauled off to the dungeon. Meanwhile, Shin-won is interrogating the head of the kidnapping ring and uncovers a massive secret. The attack on So-rang and the tragic death of the late Crown Princess Ja-yeon were masterminded by the exact same person. The king is furious. He comes up with a brilliant plan. He intentionally hands the kidnapping boss over to the Grand Chamberlain for trial. He wants to pit the 2 villains against each other, knowing they'll eventually tear each other apart to save their own skins. When the king hears So-rang is in jail, he rushes there to bust her out. But in a move no one expected, So-rang refuses to leave. She tells him she's already made a deal with the Grand Queen Mother. She'll stay in prison to keep the peace, as long as the Queen Mother promises to launch a full-scale, honest investigation into all the corruption and secrets of the Queen selection. So-rang is willing to sacrifice her freedom to make sure justice is finally served. Seeing the calm but unwavering determination in So-rang's eyes, the king decides to respect her choice and lets her stay in the dungeon for the time being. That night, under the king's personal supervision, the Grand Chamberlain begins the high-stakes interrogation of the kidnapping boss. During the session, the king suddenly chimes in, directly voicing his suspicion that the boss was the one who murdered the late Crown Princess. He casually asks, "If this crime is proven, what should the penalty be?" The Grand Chamberlain answers coldly, "According to the law, his entire clan must be exterminated." Hearing this, the boss's face pales with pure dread. He might have been ready to die for his master, but he never intended to drag his entire family to the grave with him. Suddenly, his instinct for survival kicks in, and he starts fighting for his life. He confesses to everything, including the murder of the princess, but he hints that there was a mastermind behind it all. However, he keeps the name a secret, using it as his final get-out-of-jail-free card to force Chamberlain to save him. The next morning, Shin-won finally releases So-rang from prison, and he has a surprise waiting for her. The former head court lady is back. She had heard about So-rang's plight and returned to the palace specifically to help. As a legendary figure in the palace, her first move is to grill the staff to find out who took bribes during the queen selection. Even though she's been gone for a while, her authority is terrifying. Eventually, a junior maid cracks and spills all the dirty secrets. With the truth finally out, Sorang is officially cleared and released. She runs straight to the king, and the two share a powerful emotional embrace. Meanwhile, the Grand Chamberlain is in a total panic. He's being blackmailed by the kidnapping boss and has zero intention of saving him. Instead, he orders his henchmen to find a chance to permanently silence the boss in his cell. But when the assassin sneaks into the jail under the cover of night, he finds the cell empty. The boss has vanished without a trace. At the same time, Sorang is suddenly taken away from her quarters by a mysterious group. When the king finds out she's missing, he immediately orders a search. They quickly pick up her trail, but the direction she's being taken is unusual. While the queen's selection process is nearing its end, the single men in the city have officially reached their breaking point. They organize a massive protest, demanding the king lift the marriage ban once and for all. This time, they use the popular spicy romance books as their rallying cry. The mob marches toward the palace in a huge wave. Seeing this, the evil stepmother just sneers with satisfaction. Today, she plans to take her husband, the high-ranking official who is constantly sick, to see the Grand Queen Mother. Since her husband is always drugged up and frail, she's the one who really runs the household. During the meeting, the stepmother tries to push her way into the room, but she's blocked by palace officials. She's stunned. She doesn't realize that the officials she bribed have already been exposed. She no longer has any eyes and ears inside the palace. When the Grand Queen Mother finally meets the sick official, she asks him point blank about his other daughter. She had done her homework and discovered that his family was supposed to have 2 daughters. The official is totally lost for words, looking dazed and unresponsive, a clear result of the long-term mind control and drugging by his wife. The Grand Queen Mother observes everything, and in that moment, she makes her final decision. By now, the protesters have swarmed the palace gates. The Grand Queen Mother had already been planning to lift the ban, so she grabbed the scroll containing the name of the new queen, ready to announce it to the people herself. Suddenly, the king arrives and asks to go with her. He's tense, desperate to know who exactly has been chosen as his bride. The palace gates finally swing open, and a high-ranking official announces that the common people are allowed inside to witness the results of the queen selection firsthand. Standing before the Great Hall, the Grand Queen Mother steps forward and announces the winner. It's the younger daughter. The stepmother is absolutely over the moon, watching her daughter step up to receive the royal decree. But suddenly, Sorang appears from the side, walking right up alongside the younger daughter toward the Grand Queen Mother. It turns out the very name the younger daughter has been using actually belongs to Sorang. Years ago, the stepmother had framed Sorang, kicked her out of the house, and then had her own younger daughter steal Sorang's identity. Now, Sorang is back to reclaim everything that was stolen from her. As they both stand before the Grand Queen Mother, it's revealed that the secret deal between Sorang and the Queen Mother wasn't just about investigating cheating. It was about revealing Sorang's true identity. The Grand Queen Mother looks at the 2 women and points out, "Which one of you is the real owner of this name?" The younger daughter speaks up first, desperate, claiming she is the real one. But Sorang fires back, calling the younger daughter by her actual birth name. She explains that the younger daughter only usurped her identity after the stepmother drove the eldest daughter away. Why? Because the rights and status of a second daughter could never dream of matching those of the firstborn. Seeing that Sorang isn't backing down, the younger daughter turns to her mother for help. The stepmother immediately tries to force her husband, the second-rank official, to speak up. As the father of both girls, his word would carry the most weight. She believes that if he denies Sorang's identity, she will lose everything. But the official is in a state of total shock. He had been living under the stepmother's web of lies for years, believing his eldest daughter had run away with a servant. Now that the truth is staring him in the face, he is overcome with massive regret. With a steady voice, he looks at the Grand Queen Mother and declares, "Sorang is my true eldest daughter." With the truth finally out, the dam breaks. People from the crowd begin shouting out the stepmother's other crimes, including her role in harming Hae Young and her partnership with the kidnapping ring to sell young women. Public outrage boils over, and the stepmother becomes the target of everyone's hatred. She looks to the Grand Chamberlain for one last hope of salvation, but he doesn't move a muscle. He treats her like a stranger. The guards step in and drag the stepmother away in disgrace. With the villain defeated, Sorang officially reclaims her birth name and her status. The king steps forward and announces to the entire nation that the woman he is marrying, the new queen of Joseon, is Sorang. They share a deep emotional embrace in front of the Great Hall, letting everyone witness their love finally come to fruition. Then comes the moment everyone has been waiting for. The king officially declares, "As of today, the marriage ban in Joseon is officially lifted." The crowd of single men and the artist go wild with celebration. The artist, who has always loved Harung, had been using his romance comics to express his feelings. He had become an inspiration for all the single men to never give up on finding the one. In the heat of the moment, Harung is finally won over by his persistence and deep affection. As the ban ends, they embrace, becoming the very first couple to marry in the new era. The entire country is suddenly flooded with romance, as countless couples finally hold hands in public. But while the rest of the country is partying, the Grand Chamberlain and his cronies are miserable. They are still terrified of the kidnapping boss who escaped from prison. The boss was the pawn who did all their dirty work. If the king ever gets a hold of him, the Chamberlain is finished. But that very night, the kidnapping boss decides to settle the score himself. He breaks into the Grand Chamberlain's house, fueled by rage. He tells Chamberlain that he was always loyal, but was rewarded with betrayal and abandonment. He starts listing every single crime the Chamberlain ever committed, using it as leverage to threaten him. But the Chamberlain is done talking. He was hoping the boss would show up so he could finish him off. He immediately signals a group of hidden assassins to surround the boss, ready to silence him forever. Just as the Grand Chamberlain is about to finish off the kidnapping boss, Shin Won appears from the shadows, followed closely by the king. As it turns out, the prison break was a total setup orchestrated by the king. By driving a wedge between the kidnapping boss and the Chamberlain, the king deliberately let the man escape, knowing he would run straight to his master. By following his footsteps, the king finally got the hard evidence he needed to see exactly who was pulling the strings. The king confronts the Chamberlain, and now that the ugly truth is out in the open, the old villain has no more excuses for his long list of crimes. Realizing he's backed into a corner, the Grand Chamberlain draws his sword, deciding to go down fighting alongside his loyal henchmen. But the king is 10 steps ahead. He has royal snipers positioned on all sides, and they immediately rain down arrows, wiping out the Chamberlain's followers in seconds. Even as he's bleeding out, the Chamberlain tries one last desperate lunging attack at the king. But the king is faster. With one swift, powerful sword strike, he cuts down the Chamberlain, officially purging the palace of its greatest traitor. Back at the palace, the king finally drops his blood-stained sword. He's emotionally exhausted and needs the one person who can comfort him, so he heads to their private love nest tent. He finds Sorong warming herself by the fire, and she invites him to sit. As they talk, Sorong asks when he first found out about her real identity. The king admits that Shin Won told him everything. He reveals that one of the main reasons Shin Won returned to the palace was specifically to help Sorong reclaim her name and her life. Sorong is overwhelmed with gratitude, realizing how lucky she is to have people like Shin Won and the Grand Queen Mother in her corner. She knows that without the Queen Mother's willingness to trust her, defeating the stepmother would have been an impossible task. Just as the romantic vibe is peaking and they're about to head into the tent to rest, the Grand Queen Mother suddenly crashes the party. Without a word, she pulls rank and takes Soreng away. According to strict palace tradition, a bride-to-be cannot see the king for 40 days before the wedding. The king is absolutely crushed, realizing he's about to endure 40 days of long-distance heartache, but he can't argue with the Queen Mother's orders. He can only watch sadly as Soreng is led away. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, the head court lady wakes Soreng up for her princess to queen boot camp. The endless protocol lessons and boring books make Soreng's head spin, and she's soon dying for a nap. Finally, she begs for a food break. The court lady agrees and heads to the royal kitchen to prepare a meal. While she's working, a male palace official enters. He clears the room, sending the other maids away, and then pulls a surprise move. He boldly proposes to the head court lady. The tough court lady blushes like a schoolgirl, and the two end up playfully chasing each other around the palace grounds. Soreng watches from her door, smiling at the scene. Love is officially in the air everywhere. This is the beautiful, free Joseon the people have been dreaming of. That evening, Shin Won takes the kidnapping boss to the outskirts of the city and unties his ropes. The boss thinks he's finally getting a chance to flee, but he's in for a rude awakening. He's immediately surrounded by the mountain bandits. It turns out the wavy-haired leader's sister was a victim of this man's kidnapping ring, and now the bandits are here to settle the score once and for all. Meanwhile, the king hands down the final sentences for the step family. The father, the second-rank official, had been drugged and poisoned by the stepmother for so long that his health was destroyed. Recognizing that he was a victim of his wife's control, the king allows him to retire peacefully to his hometown. The younger daughter is sentenced to live as a slave in the harsh borderlands for her lies and deception. And as for the evil stepmother, for her crimes of murder and embezzlement, she is sentenced to death. The 40 days pass in a blur, and finally, the great wedding day arrives. Surrounded by the cheers and blessings of their friends, family, and the entire nation, Sorong dons the heavy, magnificent ceremonial robes, ready to officially become the queen of Chosun. Even as the crown is placed on her head, Sorong can't help but second-guess herself. She wonders if a woman who was once a professional con artist and a fake shaman truly deserves to be the queen of an entire nation. But her business partner, Gwenny, is there to give her the ultimate pep talk. He reminds her that during the dark years of the marriage ban, she was the only one brave enough to make people smile, even if it meant breaking the law to open her shop. He tells her that a woman so devoted to the happiness of others is exactly who Joseon needs as its queen. Immediately after the wedding, Sorong proves him right. She hears about a palace maid who had to return to work just 7 days after giving birth and recently fainted from sheer exhaustion. Sorong is outraged. She knows that giving birth is physically draining, and 7 days is nowhere near enough time for a woman to recover. She takes this straight to the king, proposing a massive reform, extending maternity leave to a full 70 days. At first, the king hesitates, thinking 70 days is an incredibly long time. But Sorong stands her ground, telling him that a truly wise king is one who prioritizes the well-being of his people. The king is moved by her compassion, and not only signs the decree, but adds his own pro-dad twist. He grants husbands 30 days of paternity leave so they can care for their wives and newborns. Later, the king asks about the maid who fainted. When he hears that her health is still fragile, he starts to panic about Sorong's future. That night, he holds her hands tight and tells her something unexpected. "We don't even need to have children. I just want you to be healthy and stay by my side." But Sorong reassures him. She tells him that no matter how difficult childbirth or the future might be, as long as they face it together, they can overcome anything. She promises that if he stays by her side with that same love and care, she'll be just fine. But Sorong isn't done fixing the country. She also tackles a cruel old law regarding the selection rejects, the women who participated in the queen selection but weren't chosen. Historically, these women were forbidden from ever marrying anyone else, essentially being forced into a life of solitude. So-rong convinces the king to open his heart and the law, allowing all of them to finally find their own true love and marry. When Hae-young hears this news, she's overjoyed. While playing in the courtyard and catching cicadas, a rooster suddenly flies over the wall. Hae-young jumps to catch it, and in a classic K-drama moment, falls right onto Shinwon. As they stare into each other's eyes, you can practically feel the romantic spark in the air. Hae-young gives him a bright, beautiful smile and invites him inside for a cup of tea, signaling the start of a new romance for our favorite investigator. Then it's finally time for the big bandit and maid blind date. At first, the palace maids are totally not into these rugged, leather-clad mountain men. They think they're way too rough around the edges. But Gwang Yi steps in with his fortune-telling expertise. He uses his theories on fate and destiny to match each maid with a perfect bandit husband. The maids trust his word completely, and just like that, the lonely mountain warriors finally find their happily ever after. To wrap things up, the king and So-rong take one of their famous undercover strolls through the city. They look around and see a Joseon that has been completely transformed. The streets are overflowing with happy couples, no longer afraid to show their love. Standing in the middle of the crowd, the king and queen share a deep, passionate kiss, hoping that every lover in Joseon gets to live a life full of romance every single day. And that is the story of how a fake shaman and a heartbroken king broke a curse and filled a kingdom with love. Thanks for watching.